This is the story of a woman betrayed by the man she loved and abandoned by her own father, only to be falsely accused of murdering the princess. As if that weren't enough, the crown prince himself sought her death. Her past life was nothing short of a nightmare, but now she has been given a second chance. Reborn into the past, she has one goal: to stay as far away as possible from her father, her treacherous ex-lover, and, most importantly, the crown prince, who once tried to kill her. Can she rewrite her fate and escape her destined doom? Or is she bound to repeat the tragedy of her past life? The scene opens with a young woman being forcibly taken by her father. Despite her desperate pleas for him to stop, her father remains unmoved. Where is he leading his daughter? Let us delve deeper into the story just before all this started. A piercing scream echoed through the halls of the mansion. A young man said, "There was poison in the princess's drink. You, Jubilian, you poisoned the princess." Jubilian was shocked. She kept telling her fiancé that she didn't poison the princess, but her fiancé, Mikhail, didn't believe her. Mikhail picked up the princess and said, "You poisoned her out of jealousy because I love the princess." Jubilian was in complete shock. The scandal swept through the court like wildfire. Rumors flared, and Jubilian, once dignified, was now reviled. She couldn't deny she despised the princess for taking Mikhail from her, but she would never wish her dead. Then from behind, a sudden figure emerged. It was Duke Floyan, Jubilian's father. The emperor in the hall shouted, "Throw her in prison immediately." In her final hope, she turned to her father, her voice trembling. "Father, please, you believe me, right?" But the duke smacked her hand and told the emperor, "Your Majesty, I will take her to prison myself." The Majesty raised doubts. "Why should I trust you?" The duke spoke the words that stole the breath from her lungs. "I will lock her in the Shadow Room." The Shadow Room, where neither magic nor weapon could penetrate. A pit of despair meant for those accused of high treason. Jubilian's blood ran cold. Her own father would doom her to a life worse than death. At the entrance of the Shadow Room, memories flashed before her. Ever since she was small, she begged for her father's attention. The Duke had once asked, "Why are you here?" She replied, "Because I wanted to see you." With a cold gaze, he replied, "Don't come to find me for that reason." Those words left her in tears. As days went by, she always asked, "Where is Dad?" Years passed, "What about Dad?" And more years went by, "Father won't come, will he?" She had always wondered if he truly cared for her. And now she knew. The Duke doesn't love his daughter. Suddenly, he handed her a cloth-wrapped object, a dagger. "Endure it," he said. Jubilian's breath hitched. Did he want me to end my own life? Desperation clawed at her, and she begged him one last time, "Please, don't throw me away like this." Her pleas echoed back unanswered. Alone in the shadowy void, tears streamed from her eyes, sacred and lonely. Then Jubilian heard a commotion outside the gate. A guard mentioned the crown prince. He was the older brother of the princess who was poisoned. She was scared. Outside the Shadow Room, the crown prince appeared. "Step aside," the prince commanded the guards. "I will interrogate her myself." The guard couldn't stop the crown prince. Jubilian clutched the dagger. The crown prince approached her. "So you are Jubilian." Jubilian was terrified. She knew he would torture her to death. She raised the blade, her mind heavy with regret. She had only ever wanted to be loved. With a heavy heart, she made a final decision and took her own life. The life of Jubilian ended there. Somewhere, a woman in a blue dress lowered the tea in her hands with a wistful sigh. "If only I could know how it ends," she murmured. A man's voice interrupted her reverie. "Why did you call me?" The woman in blue was Jubilian. Was she transported back in time, or was she someone else in Jubilian's body? She coldly met Mikhail's gaze. "You're 3 hours late," Mikhail scowled. "Did you call me just to say that?" With a sigh, Jubilian said, "I'm ending this. I want to break up with you." Mikhail, surprised, put his hand on his head. "Do you think that I believe your words?" Son of Marquis Mikhail Albert Hessen. He was the man she used to love. Just 4 days ago, Jubilian remembered everything that happened to her in the future. She had already been in a relationship with Mikhail for 2 years and had bullied anyone who approached him. A guilt struck Jubilian for her past behavior. Mikhail was the only person who offered his hand to her when she was lonely, and she liked the attention he gave her. Because of this, she became very obsessed with him. "I'm telling the truth. I want to let you go now." Mikhail stared at her intently. Jubilian only wanted to avoid the death flag by staying away from him. Jubilian asked, "Do you not believe me?" Mikhail replied, "Fine, I'll believe you this once, but never show your face to me again." He expected her to protest, to lash out, or beg him to stay. Instead, Jubilian simply apologized, her voice steady. "I wish you happiness, Mikhail." Mikhail's composure wavered, irritation stirring under his skin. He thought, surely this is just a ploy, some twisted attempt to gain my attention. Jubilian, however, felt an unexpected lightness settle in her chest. She was free. Suddenly, her father blocked her path. She was surprised to see her father, Duke Regis Adriplune. He was the nation's revered swordmaster, her only family, and a man who had never shown her an ounce of love. As he was leaving, Jubilian said, "Have you returned safely, father?" In her mind, Jubilian only wanted to chase after his money, not affection, because she knew what kind of man he was. She asked, "Are you tired from your training?" The Duke looked at her intently, which was awkward for Jubilian. With a gentle bow, she said, "I'll be going now." As she was heading upstairs, the Duke spoke out, "I didn't train today." Jubilian turned back in surprise, and then the Duke asked her, "You returned early today." In the past, Jubilian would have been out for hours, trailing after Mikhail. Jubilian told him the truth. "I broke up with Mikhail." Her father's expression shifted, a flicker of anger crossing his face. Why? Realization dawned on her. Duke Regis admired Mikhail, his underling. Still, Jubilian gathered her courage and explained, "Mikhail doesn't love me. I can't bear to stay in a one-sided relationship." Her father's jaw tightened, displeasure clear, for reasons unknown to her. She thought, was he envisioning Mikhail as his son-in-law? With a newfound resolve, Jubilian replied, "I want someone who loves me. I want to be happy." Her father, with a surprised look, turned away without a single word. As she watched him leave, Jubilian's heart sank. She remembered how her father had left her in that place. Jubilian now only wanted her father to leave her alone, just like before. At dawn, a maid was bringing a towel to Jubilian's room. She was thinking that after the breakup, Jubilian would have destroyed everything in her room. The maid was panicked as she knocked on the door and told Jubilian that the bath was ready. No one replied. When she came in, she was shocked to see her lady. Jubilian was crying in her bed. The shocked maid shouted, "My lady!" Jubilian was embarrassed that someone saw her like that. The maid asked if everything was all right, to which Jubilian, startled, hastily wiped her face and replied that she was simply tired and would bathe tomorrow. The maid was worried about her. "Please take a rest," she replied with a smile. "Thank you, Marilyn." The maid teared up, fearing she had caused Jubilian distress, and hurriedly apologized before departing, leaving Jubilian momentarily baffled. The maid muttered, "Our pitiful lady is so heartbroken that she is crying." As she was heading out, she didn't expect Duke Regis to appear in front of her. "That child cried?" As the birds chirped in the morning, the wind gently moved the curtains as Jubilian opened her eyes, a strange flicker of hope stirring in her chest. Her maid entered and informed her that Duke Regis wanted to share breakfast with her. In the dining hall, Jubilian was taken aback, as her father never ate with her. Duke Regis gazed at Jubilian, surprising her completely. He then placed pieces of meat on her plate, urging her to eat more. The previous night, the maid had told the Duke, "I think the breakup was a big shock to the lady." Jubilian wondered why he was behaving so differently. Duke Regis had risen to become the indomitable leader of the Central Army and the Royal Guard, a man who commanded respect throughout the kingdom. Meanwhile, Jubilian was a social outcast with a scandalous reputation. As Jubilian pushed her food around her plate, her father's voice broke through her thoughts. "Jubilian, what kind of man do you desire?" Caught off guard by the unexpected question, Jubilian's heart raced with nerves. "Why? Why do you ask?" "I'm simply curious," he replied, his tone giving nothing away. A flood of worries overwhelmed her. Was he already arranging a marriage for her? She pushed the thought aside and responded, her voice barely steady, "I desire a man stronger than you, father." Duke Regis asked, "Are you serious?" Expecting him to scoff at her answer, knowing no man in the kingdom could match his strength or prowess, Jubilian quickly added, "Money, honor, family, handsome, skills. I would never settle for a man who didn't meet all these expectations." A glint of something flickered in her father's eyes, but he kept his face impassive. Just when Juvalian thought she had dodged his curiosity, he caught her off guard again. "Then come out with me." Her breath hitched. "Why?" she asked. Duke replied, "Because it's a nice weather today." They had never once gone out together since she was born. As they strolled through the bustling streets of Agate, merchants called out to sell their finest wares. They both looked elegant and fancy. Later, Duke Regis made several purchases at a shop, leaving Jubelian wondering why he'd brought her along. Each time her gaze lingered on an item, her father bought it without hesitation. Just as she resolved to escape this confusing outing, her eyes fell upon a woman approaching her father with a sword in hand. Jubelian studied her. A memory surfaced of Captain Dame Julia, the Queen's former guard who had vanished under mysterious circumstances. Jubelian felt a pang of unease as people stared at her. She quickly retreated into a nearby shop to avoid the attention. Once inside, she glanced around, realizing too late that she had entered the Howling Bear Armor Specialty Shop. "Well, well, a fine lady with exquisite taste," he exclaimed, his eyes gleaming. Jubelian flushed, both embarrassed and at a loss for words. She hadn't planned to enter an armor shop, much less talk to anyone there. Their exchange was interrupted as a stranger entered, paying the shopkeeper with an intensity that seemed to absorb all light. Jubelian hadn't sensed his presence until he was beside her. His piercing red eyes met hers, and for a moment she was held captive, unable to look away. But the stranger's voice broke the silence, curt and icy. "What are you looking at?" Jubelian couldn't deny that she had been drawn to him by his striking features, which exuded an undeniable allure. When he dismissed her with a curt command, Jubelian defiantly informed him that he was purchasing the very items she had been eyeing. The shop owner, taken aback, questioned if she truly intended to buy armor polish. Flustered by her own behavior, Jubelian continued her charade, explaining that she couldn't bear to see her accessories lose their luster. The shop owner, convinced by Jubelian's words, scurried off to fetch more polish from his stock. Jubelian, however, didn't want more of that. Meanwhile, the man, eager to be rid of the situation, snatched up the armor polish and made to leave. Jubelian called out to him, insisting he take his change, but he simply ignored her. Refusing to be brushed off, Jubelian pointed out that he had overpaid, handing over a gold coin worth more than the polish itself. When he finally turned to face her, she couldn't help but inquire, "Are you a foreigner?" 1 gold is about 2 weeks of food for a family. You could buy 10 armor polishes for 1 gold. Still silent, the man continued to regard Jubelian with an inscrutable gaze. In the midst of their silent standoff, the shop owner returned, announcing that they were in luck as he had 10 polishes in stock. Seizing the opportunity, the man slipped away from the shop, leaving Jubelian behind. The mysterious man was met by a female guard, who informed him that the Duke had requested to visit his estate. To everyone's surprise, the man's true identity was revealed. He was none other than the Crown Prince. When questioned if something was amiss, the Crown Prince recalled Jubelian's words and assured his female guard, "Everything's all right." Meanwhile, as the Duke and Jubelian reunited, his curiosity was piqued by what she was carrying. Jubelian still wondered about that man. Dismissing her purchase, Duke Regis declared it was time to depart. Exhausted from the long day, Jubelian trudged home, her feet aching and her patience wearing thin. Still, she pushed herself to continue. But then Jubelian stumbled. Luckily, she was caught by her father. He asked, "What are you doing?" To which Jubelian replied, "I am sorry." Jubelian was truly embarrassed. But then Duke Regis surprised her by lifting her up and carrying her. Despite her protests that she was fine, the Duke silenced her as they headed toward the carriage, leaving onlookers in awe of his actions. Jubelian couldn't help but wonder what was going through her father's mind. As she requested to be put down so they could continue shopping, the Duke said, "Be still." Unable to argue further, Jubelian fell silent. Her mind raced. "It's too hard to understand, my father." Jubelian started sweating, and she began feeling strange. While the Duke spoke of a potential suitor for her, Jubelian struggled to hear his words and ultimately fainted in his arms, leaving Duke Regis alarmed and panicked by the unexpected turn of events. Jubelian lay motionless in her bed, her father keeping a vigilant watch over her, praying for her to awaken. Even in her unconscious state, Jubilian could sense her father's presence and couldn't help but wonder why tears stained his cheeks. Finally, Jubilian stirred, feeling as though she had just emerged from a nightmare. Alan, the family doctor, had feared the worst, believing she might never open her eyes again. When Jubilian inquired about the duration of her unconsciousness, she was taken aback to learn that 3 days had passed. As the maids came to pay their respects, Jubilian noticed a bouquet of flowers by her bedside. The maids revealed that they were gifts from noble ladies, wishing her a swift recovery. Jubilian's father then entered the room to check on her. She couldn't fathom his concern, convinced she must be dreaming. After a brief examination, the Duke swiftly departed, leaving Jubilian to dismiss any hope of genuine care from him. At that moment, it dawned on her that she was utterly dependent on her father's wealth and estate. The maid inquired if Jubilian would respond to the letters she had received during her unconsciousness. Determined to mend her reputation and make amends for past wrongs, Jubilian vowed to personally address each well-wisher. Her next unexpected decision left the maids astounded. Jubilian announced her intention to pursue studies. In a bid to break free from her father's control, she knew she had to equip herself with knowledge. The prospect of delving into unfamiliar subjects both excited and daunted her. Upon entering the room, Jubilian was startled to find her father present and mistakenly greeted him with a cheerful, "Good morning." "It's afternoon." The Duke's correction left her mortified, prompting her to acknowledge her error without hesitation. The Duke was taken aback to see Jubilian carrying a book on territorial management and inquired about her interest in it. Jubilian explained that she was curious about her father's duties as a lord. When pressed further by the Duke, Jubilian felt a surge of panic, but managed to compose herself and claim it was merely out of curiosity. Feeling the weight of stress bearing down on her, Jubilian recalled Alan's advice to relax in order to prevent another fainting spell. However, her mind was consumed with thoughts of making a mistake in front of her father and the fear of fainting once more. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the Duke posed a question to Jubilian. "Do you know the 3 elements of a field?" To her relief, Jubilian answered correctly, earning a sense of accomplishment. The Duke said, "You know it well," then proceeded to ask more questions. Little did she know that what started as a simple study session would evolve into a rigorous hour-long quiz with her father. Jubilian could only muster a smile and nod as she responded to the Duke's inquiries, all the while concealing her inner turmoil. Their interaction was interrupted by the butler, who informed the Duke of a waiting guest. As the Duke turned his gaze towards Jubilian, she quickly feigned interest in her book, avoiding his eyes. The Duke, impressed by Jubilian's dedication, handed her a book of his own and instructed her to read it. Jubilian panicked, not knowing what to do. Overwhelmed by the weight of her father's expectations, Jubilian found herself exhausted as night fell, with 3 more books awaiting her attention. In the midst of her fatigue, Jubilian discovered a pendant nestled within one of the books, intended for her father's possession. As she made her way to return it, she stumbled upon her father engaged in a heated argument with his guest. Eavesdropping on their conversation, Jubilian overheard the Duke addressing the guest as Max, sparking her curiosity. "Who is Max?" Jubilian was on the verge of returning to her study when she caught wind of the Duke calling out the name of his guest, Max. Intrigued, she wondered about the nature of their relationship, considering they were on a first-name basis. As she discreetly observed them, Jubilian nearly got caught and realized that her father's guest was the man she had encountered at the armor store. The Duke, Regis, emphasized to Max that swordsmanship was about safeguarding precious things, not destroying them. In a moment of defiance, Max dismissed the Duke's teachings, referring to him as a mere teacher and rejecting any notion of weakness. Jubilian was taken aback to discover that her father had a student. When Regis imparted to Max the idea that strength often comes from protecting others, Max abruptly bid farewell, claiming he had no interest in such lessons. Before departing, Regis cryptically hinted that one day Max would find someone worth protecting. Jubilian overheard this exchange and pondered whether her father had someone he held dear. The father who left his only child to die. Max mentioned, "I have found a rat that is hiding." Jubelian was scared when she heard rat. Unbeknownst to Jubelian, Max's reference to a rat was actually directed at her. Max was about to confront her, but Regis warned him, "Don't catch it." With an intense stare, he told him, "I will not forgive you if you do anything to her." They both stared at each other as Jubelian slipped away. She tried her best to escape. As Regis saw Jubelian leave, he was incensed by Max's derogatory remark toward Jubelian, despite knowing her true identity. Max defended himself, claiming he struggled to see clearly in the darkness. A decade had passed since Max had trained under Regis, learning firsthand the Duke's strict and direct approach. Yet, the only time Regis displayed a softer side was in the presence of his daughter. Max refused to accept what the Duke offered, feeling as though it would only serve to chain him down and expose his vulnerability. Before the Empress's untimely passing, she entrusted Duke Regis with the task of teaching Max the skills necessary for survival. After his mother's death, people around him whispered and speculated about the deceased ruler, commenting on how weak she was. Rage surged in Max. Despite Duke Regis's attempts to understand Max's inner turmoil, his focus remained on Jubelian. Only because of her had the monster within Regis not emerged. Meanwhile, Jubelian cowered in her room, wrapping herself in a blanket out of fear of the rat. The maid asked, "Was there really a rat? But the workers said that they got rid of all of them." Jubelian said, "I am sure they missed some rat's child or something." She panicked as she thought, what if they multiply? Upon learning of Jubelian's distress, the Duke asked, "Is that child nervous?" The head butler told him that they did not find any mice. The Duke was speechless. The Duke realized that she had misunderstood Max's words. The Duke asked Derek, "Where do rats usually live?" Derek was shocked by the statement. The Duke said, "Never mind." Then he asked him about the marriage list for Jubelian. Derek told him that the list would be completed today and mentioned a letter from Mikhail, sparking his curiosity and igniting his anger. Why did that bastard send a letter? Duke Regis demanded to know why Mikhail had sent the letter, to which Derek replied that he was still convinced Jubelian had broken up with him to gain his attention. "The letters? Huh?" Duke Regis sternly instructed Derek, "As soon as you see one, burn it." Meanwhile, Jubelian received some much-needed good news when her maid informed her that the rat troubling her had been caught. Relieved, Jubelian could finally enter her house without fear. As she enjoyed her snacks, she was surprised to receive a letter from Count Arlo. It was actually an invitation to his youngest daughter's birthday party. The Count's youngest daughter, Rosemarie Arlo, was one of the individuals who had conspired against Jubelian, viewing her as an evil woman for befriending the Grand Duchess. Jubelian, in turn, had a strained relationship with her. She instructed her maids to prepare flowers and also prepare a cake for her. Jubelian sent a response to Rosemarie's invitation. In Count Arlo's mansion, a young girl was ecstatic to receive a personally written and designed letter from Jubelian, as she had always admired her from afar. She couldn't control her feelings and rolled around on the bed. She thought, "I never imagined that she'd accept my invitation." Rose had always admired Jubelian's beauty and style. When she had tried to greet her before, Jubelian had ignored her after spotting Mikhail. Of course, that was so embarrassing. She, however, didn't hold any grudge against Jubelian and was ready to reply to her. Jubelian, however, was taken aback by the lengthy 10-page letter from Rosemarie, who had attempted to mimic her writing style. She was charmed by Rose's letter. After reading the letter, she thought it would be a big party. Jubelian thought, "It will be a big party," while her maids admired her for making a friend. In the midst of the social circle, whispers of Jubelian's letters circulated among the noble ladies. Some speculated that she had finally grown up, while others harbored doubts, recounting past grievances inflicted by Jubelian. Mikhail, a silent observer, absorbed the chatter about Jubelian's acceptance of Rosemarie's invitation. Despite receiving news indirectly, his emotions simmered beneath the surface. His face showed frustration. "Why haven't you replied to my letter?" Upon returning to his grand mansion, Mikhail wasted no time commanding his butler, "Tell Count Arlo that I'll attend his daughter's birthday celebration." Anxiously, he asked, "Any letters from Jubelian?" He was met with disappointment when his butler reported no letters had arrived. He told his butler to leave, and as soon as the butler left, frustration boiled over him. He hurled his tea across the room, unable to contain his anger. "I'll make you regret ignoring me." Jubelian was overwhelmed by the weight of her desire to find the perfect gift for Rosemarie. Little did she know that her simple shopping trip would turn into a grand procession with a dozen knights by her side. Duke Regis had insisted on a night guard accompanying her, much to Jubelian's surprise and dismay. This was too much for her. As they arrived at the shop, Jubelian's cousin, Galording, questioned her decision to enter. Jubelian firmly replied, "This is the place I want to go." Upon entering, they were greeted by an unprofessional workplace, with the craftsman looking utterly disappointed. The craftsman, Ian Fader, told them, "I'm sorry, I can't take any orders right now." Approaching the weakened Ian, Jubelian boldly said, "I would like to commission you for a special creation." Jubelian's unwavering faith in his abilities left Ian surprised. He asked, "But why someone like me?" To which Jubelian replied, "Because you are the one who can make it." Ian didn't believe her and asked her to leave, but Jubelian persisted. "I believe in you," she said. He turned around, astonished. "Believe in me?" "Yes," Jubelian replied. "I have absolute faith that you will magnificently produce creations better than anyone else." Tears surged in Ian's eyes as he wiped them away, embarrassed. Little did anyone know, Jubelian was aware that in the future, Ian would become the best craftsman in the Empire. Just 6 months later, he would create a necklace for the princess's coming-of-age ceremony, causing a buzz among high society. He asked, "What item would you like me to craft?" Jubelian just smiled, thinking her foresight had secured the future of the Empire's finest craftsmen. Meanwhile, at the Duke's mansion, Regis finally received the list of potential suitors for Jubelian. As he reviewed the names, he was puzzled by the inclusion of Maximilian and promptly requested its removal. Before he could investigate further, a message from His Majesty summoned him to the palace without delay. Having entrusted Ian with the task, Jubelian had initially anticipated a simple request. However, she now found herself grappling with the decision of choosing her own gift, having been too preoccupied with her father's demeanor during their previous encounter. While traveling, an exquisite pair of blue cufflinks caught her eye. She thought they would look good on her father. She then came up with a brilliant idea to pair them with the pendant she had found in the book. Just as Jubelian was about to purchase the cufflinks, she unexpectedly encountered Radian. He greeted her with a smirk on his face, and Jubelian's expression immediately turned sour. Radian Droyle, Mikhail's cousin, was notorious for his penchant for gossip and sharp tongue. "It's been a while, Sir Droyle," Jubelian spoke coolly. Radian replied, "Why speak so formally? Just because you broke up with Mikhail?" Radian grabbed Jubelian's hand and kissed it, saying, "Please, just call me Radian, my beautiful lady." Radian's attempt to establish a more casual rapport was met with discomfort by Jubelian, who found his behavior rude, but chose to endure it, aware of his ulterior motives. Jubelian said farewell and tried to leave as her guard kept Radian at bay. Jubelian picked up her cufflinks, while Radian's keen observation led him to speculate about her potential involvement with another man. This left him curious about how Mikhail would react to such news. In the grand halls of the Imperial Palace of the Ashet Empire, Duke Regis stood before His Majesty, who was visibly agitated by the presence of a rat lurking around the palace. The king, unable to rest due to an assassin, implored the Duke to rid the palace of the intruder. The king suggested that the Duke remain within the palace walls to lead the investigation. The Duke agreed to stay in the palace for a few days. The Emperor, with a smirk, said, "You sure are reliable." Outside, one of the Duke's soldiers told him he didn't have to stay, to which the Duke replied, "You all don't have to stay here with me." Meanwhile, high above in the trees, Max watched the proceedings with disappointment. He easily followed orders from the Emperor, but felt discontent with the situation. Then, the Duke was informed by a guard that Jubelian had returned home and was very happy to be invited to Miss Rose's birthday party. Max's frustration grew as he observed the Duke's reaction to the news of his daughter's happiness. However, Max's disdain for the Duke's actions only intensified as he saw them as signs of weakness. He asked himself, "Why is she so precious to you?" A man who could dispose of anything he disliked, yet every time he thinks of her, he becomes weak. Max believed that the Duke's weakness, which the king held over him, prevented any chance of overthrowing the emperor. He recalled the Duke's words about Jubilian and dismissed them as nonsense. Determined to uncover the mystery, he left to see the person who made the Duke so vulnerable. At Mikhail's mansion, Radian visited him, finding him preoccupied with his duties. Mikhail noticed Radian's unusually cheerful demeanor. Radian told him to bring some tea, but Mikhail declined. When Radian casually mentioned that Jubilian had left Mikhail due to his cold treatment, the tension between the two men escalated. Radian pointed out that Jubilian's purchase of cufflinks as gifts indicated a deeper connection, one that Mikhail had failed to nurture. Radian added smugly, "Those are gifts for someone special, someone close, like a lover." Radian smirked and continued, "Isn't this good news for you?" Then he called for tea again. Mikhail, weary and exasperated by Radian's words, sternly instructed him to leave if he had nothing more to say. Radian, struggling to hide his emotions, said, "I shall take my leave then." Meanwhile, Mikhail's mind was consumed by the unsettling thought that Jubilian may have found solace in another man's arms. Believing that Jubilian was destined to be by his side forever, he was blindsided by the possibility of her betrayal. Enraged, he smashed the table, his fury consuming him. Determined to seek retribution, Mikhail vowed to make Jubilian pay for what he saw as deceit. In another part of the estate, Jubilian sat in her room pondering the Duke's prolonged absence, wondering if his work was once again keeping him away. The maid, observing Jubilian's mood, told her, "The master won't be coming home for a few days." Jubilian, disheartened, only wanted to give him the pendant and the cufflinks she had prepared. As night fell, Jubilian drifted into a restless slumber, unaware of the looming danger. A shadowy figure slipped through her window, silently making his way toward her bed. Figure looked at Jubilian and thought she seemed weak and defenseless. He couldn't understand why Duke Regis was so obsessed with a fragile human like her. The figure was none other than Max. As Max reached out for Jubilian, he was startled to find her awake. With her eyes half closed, Jubilian muttered, "I think you're in the wrong house." He had expected her to be startled, perhaps even terrified by his presence in her room. Instead, she remained calm and told him plainly, "This is Duke Floyan's house." When Max insisted he was in the right place, Jubilian's nonchalant response only deepened his confusion. Max's gaze darkened with irritation, but Jubilian seemed utterly unbothered, even a bit tired. Was she truly unafraid, or was she masking her fear? The tension in the room heightened as Jubilian struck a match. Flickering light illuminated her features, casting an ethereal glow on her. For a moment, Max froze. He couldn't help but be captivated by the blend of fearlessness and vulnerability in her expression. As the light fully revealed her face, Jubilian suddenly recognized him. "Wait, aren't you my father's apprentice?" she asked, her voice tinged with surprise. Her mood shifted from cautious to genuinely happy upon realizing who he was. Max, too, now recognized her as the woman he had noticed at the armor shop earlier. Jubilian let out a sigh of relief, her initial panic subsiding. She had genuinely thought Max was an assassin. Earlier, as she was about to fall asleep, she had noticed a shadowy figure approaching her bed. In her fear, she had pinched her cheeks, believing it to be a dream. Convinced it was an assassin, she had been terrified, silently praying for her safety and blaming her past behavior for attracting such danger. Now that their identities were confirmed, Jubilian felt a sense of relief, but made a mental note to secure her windows more diligently in the future. Just as she began to relax, Max addressed her informally. "Hey, you! Listen!" Her newfound sense of peace shattered instantly. Sparking her irritation, she retorted sharply, "Do you have no manners? You're speaking to a noblewoman." Max replied without hesitation, "I don't care about manners." Jubilian was momentarily speechless, her patience wearing thin. If he weren't father's apprentice, I would have had him thrown out by the guards. Or worse. As she debated her next move, a maid's voice called out from the hall, inquiring about the commotion. Jubilian turned to respond, but before she could utter a word, Max's sword was suddenly at her throat, the cold steel catching her completely off guard. The guard asked if everything was all right. Jubilian assumed Max was putting on an act, so she assured the guards she was fine and added that she couldn't sleep and was just reading a book. Satisfied with her response, the guards quickly left. The moment they were gone, Jubilian said to Max, "You can put down your sword now. I've already played along with whatever act you wanted." Max didn't believe her. He was startled to see her yawn. Jubilian immediately covered her mouth, embarrassed. It was instinctive, driven by sheer exhaustion. Max lowered his sword, still watching her closely. "What are you even doing?" he asked, his tone a mixture of irritation and curiosity. Jubilian waved dismissively. "I'm tired, and I want to sleep. Why don't you just go home?" His response caught her off guard. "I don't have a home." She was confused and thought, could he really be a mercenary? She then asked him, "Do you just roam around?" Max's expression didn't change. For a moment, Jubilian stared at him, trying to process his words. The thought of a mercenary like Max not even staying at inns seemed odd to her. From her perspective, Max resembled a stray, abandoned cat. She immediately jumped to the conclusion that he had been chased out of wherever he belonged. Max's patience began to wear thin as he watched her reactions. He couldn't figure out what was going through her head. Jubilian, meanwhile, recalled how Max had been treated the last time he visited their home. He hadn't received a formal greeting, nor had any servants escorted him, which led her to suspect he hadn't been treated as a guest at all. Unsure of what to do in her current situation, especially with her father absent, Jubilian finally relented. "Fine, you can stay here for a while since you have nowhere to go." Max blinked, visibly surprised by her offer. Jubilian, however, saw it as her duty to look after her father's guests in his stead. Without waiting for his response, she grabbed a blanket, handed it to him, and said, "Don't bother thanking me. You can repay me later when you're successful." With that, she turned and promptly fell asleep, leaving Max standing there, bewildered. He hadn't expected such an abrupt conclusion to their encounter. As he watched her sleep, Max couldn't help but wonder why she wasn't afraid of him. Everyone else who had faced him either cowered in fear or tried to hide their terror. But Jubilian had shown neither. Max reminded himself of why he was there. His mission was to eliminate Jubilian, the Duke's weakness, so the Duke could break free of the Emperor's clutches. As he approached her, preparing to strangle her, he remembered her smile, to which Max hesitated. Jubilian was sleeping soundly, her expression serene and peaceful. Something about the sight unsettled him. He was shocked as he was feeling tired. He had never relaxed once in his life, and yet here, right now, he was feeling sleepy. Against his better judgment, he gave in. He set aside his worries and allowed himself to sleep, resting for the first time in years. The city was in chaos as a dragon wreaked havoc. People fled for their lives, screaming and terrified, Jubilian among them. Just as the dragon's jaws loomed dangerously close, her father appeared, shielding her from the beast with an unshakable resolve. "I won't let you hurt my daughter," he vowed, standing between Jubilian and the dragon. But then she woke with a start. It had all been a dream. Sitting up in her bed, she rubbed her eyes and let out a shaky breath. Dreaming of dragons was said to be auspicious, a sign of good fortune. That thought comforted her as she concluded she might have a good day ahead. However, as her vision cleared, she froze. Max was lying beside her. Jubilian's mind raced. What is he doing here? She wondered, her eyes narrowing on the sleeping man. Nothing had happened between them, of that she was certain. She figured Max must have simply wanted a comfortable place to sleep and chosen her bed without permission. As her gaze lingered on him, she found herself reluctantly admitting that, despite his terrible personality, he was undeniably handsome. She immediately shook the thought away. If someone finds him here, I'll be accused of kidnapping, she panicked. Determined to avoid any trouble, Jubilian reached out to wake Max, but before she could, his hand shot out, grabbing hers and pinning her down. "What are you doing?" Max demanded, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. Jubilian blinked, unfazed by his intensity. "You seem to have slept well. You're full of energy already," she quipped dryly. Max blinked in surprise. He hadn't realized he had slept through the entire night. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his tone laced with disbelief. Jubilian, however, grew more annoyed. "I gave you shelter, let you sleep on my bed, and you still have the audacity to treat me like this," she huffed. Max frowned, but before he could respond, Jubilian burst into laughter. Her eyes sparkled with amusement as a memory surfaced. He asked, "Why are you laughing?" You remind me of a stray black cat I used to know, she said, her voice light and teasing. Max raised an eyebrow, confused. Jubelian thought, that cat would come into my room whenever it felt like it and sleep on my bed as if it owned the place. It had the worst personality, indifferent and sour to the end. He is just like him. Max scowled, annoyed by her comparison. Jubelian couldn't stop laughing, tears forming in her eyes from the absurdity of it all. Her laughter was interrupted by the sound of her maid outside the room. My lady, are you awake? The maid called. Max stiffened, and Jubelian quickly tried to regain her composure. She gestured for Max to hide. She then pushed Max into her closet. If you don't want a weird misunderstanding, stay quiet and out of sight, she whispered sharply. Max hesitated, his expression a mix of irritation and curiosity. Why do you treat me so differently? Jubelian rolled her eyes and muttered, for animals, it's similar to mating. Max's face flushed, caught off guard by her bluntness. What? He exclaimed loudly. Panicking, Jubelian clamped a hand over his mouth. Shh! Do you want the maid to find you? She hissed. The maid, hearing the commotion, knocked on the door. My lady, is everything all right in there? Jiggled the door handle, surprised to find it locked. Inside, Jubelian spun toward Max, who was still hiding in her wardrobe. Stay quiet, she whispered urgently, her eyes narrowing. We don't want any misunderstandings. Max scowled, but reluctantly nodded. Jubelian smiled, satisfied. She would have felt far more at ease if he hadn't been so difficult from the start. Her brief moment of peace was shattered when she reached out and touched Max's hair, attempting to smooth it down. He glared at her, instantly annoyed, but she ignored him and turned to face the door. Max was speechless. Unlocking it, Jubelian offered the maid a calm smile. I locked it because I was worried someone might trespass into my room, she explained. The maid tilted her head, puzzled. Who would dare enter the Floyan mansion uninvited? Jubelian knew exactly who would dare to, and he was currently in her wardrobe. Jubelian hesitated, then replied, It's just a precaution. With my father away, I thought it best to be careful. The maid's expression softened, mistaking Jubelian's explanation for loneliness. She grabbed her hand gently, comforting her. Don't worry, my lady. The Duke will return soon. Jubelian nodded, appreciating the gesture. The maid's gaze drifted to Jubelian's wrist, and her eyes widened. What happened here? Meanwhile, Max remained in the closet, stewing in his thoughts. He couldn't understand why he had allowed himself to be in this ridiculous situation. Why am I even hiding? He thought, irritated with himself. He remembered her smile from earlier and thought, what is she? 20 minutes passed, and Max's patience wore thin. Just as he debated stepping out, he heard muffled words from Jubelian. Marilyn, a little lower, she said. The maid responded, Here? Jubelian let out a small moan. It hurts, Marilyn. Max's mind spun with irrational thoughts. What could they be doing? His cheeks reddened as he dismissed the ludicrous idea that had crossed his mind. Idiot, he muttered under his breath, frustrated by his distraction. Meanwhile, the maid was merely applying lotion to Jubelian's bruises, oblivious to the turmoil inside the wardrobe. Listening to their conversation, Max's mind began to wander. When the maid spoke of bruises, a realization struck him. The marks on Jubelian's wrist and body were from when he had grabbed her and pinned her down earlier. His jaw tightened. He wasn't used to feeling guilt, but seeing her injured because of him stirred something unfamiliar. He clenched his fists, guilt surging beneath his usual stoicism. When the maid finally left, Jubelian approached the wardrobe. As she opened it, Max's sharp gaze landed on her, now dressed in the vibrant yellow gown. For a moment, his displeasure faded. She looked stunning, though he would never admit it aloud. Jubelian turned to him, smiling. You must be hungry. Let's eat together. Max raised an eyebrow, confused. Why would you invite me to share a meal? Because food is more delicious when eaten together, she said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Without waiting for his response, she grabbed his hand and tugged him along. Max froze, his cheeks inexplicably turning red. During their meal, Jubelian noticed that Max had barely touched his cucumber sandwich. His expression remained neutral, but there was a distinct tension in the way he held himself. Why aren't you eating? She asked, her brow furrowing. I will, Max replied flatly, though internally he debated whether he could bring himself to eat the loathsome food. His original plan had been to eliminate his teacher's weakness and escape, But now he found himself stuck in an increasingly baffling situation. Under Jubilian's expectant gaze, Max had no choice. Reluctantly, he picked up the sandwich and took a bite. "Well?" she asked eagerly, leaning forward. Max's expression twisted with distaste, and Jubilian blinked in confusion. "You don't like it?" Max quickly swallowed, his face slightly flushed. "It's fine," he muttered, though his tone lacked conviction. Jubilian tilted her head. "You don't have to eat it if it's not to your taste." Her innocent remark deepened Max's embarrassment, his ears turning red. Determined not to appear weak, he took another bite. To his surprise, the cucumber didn't seem as bad as he remembered. At the Ashet Empire's palace, rumors swirled about Duke Regis's continued service as the Emperor's personal guard. Chancellor Duke Elios, ever pragmatic, sought an audience with the Emperor. "Are you still keeping Duke Floyan by your side?" Elios asked pointedly. The Emperor leaned back, a small smirk playing on his lips. "Of course. Who else is as ruthless and effective as Regis?" Elios frowned but bowed his head, his thoughts racing. 20 years ago, during the war with Tazaria, Duke Floyan saved the Empire. While the young and inexperienced Emperor fled the palace, Duke Floyan took up arms and turned the tide of battle. Without him, the Emperor would have no throne to sit upon. The Emperor's expression hardened, but Elios pressed on. "Your people remember that. They see him as a hero. If you continue issuing meaningless orders to him, resentment toward you will only grow." The Emperor's jaw tightened. "You speak as if I don't know my position." "I speak as someone who understands optics," Elios said calmly. "If you wish to maintain control over Duke Floyan, you should call the Crown Prince back to the Empire." Elios bowed and left, leaving the Emperor seething. Alone, the Emperor clenched his fists. "Duke Floyan would never rebel against me," he thought angrily. "I've ensured his loyalty, no matter what anyone says. That man cannot and will not defy me." Back at the mansion, Jubilian sat in her break room, trying to focus on a book. Sleepiness crept over her, likely from the heavy meal she'd just eaten. When she glanced up, she noticed Max stretched out on the couch, seemingly at ease. She blinked. "Does he even know this is my room?" Max opened his eyes and caught her staring. "What are you looking at?" Jubilian shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "You look so relaxed, that's all." But inwardly, she was curious. "How long does he plan to stay? Until Father comes back?" Max watched her carefully. "Why do you keep staring at me?" She hesitated, her thoughts drifting to how close Max seemed to be with her father. It puzzled her. The Duke was always cold and distant toward her, yet with Max, he seemed almost warm, a side of her father she'd never seen. Jubilian shook her head, trying to dismiss the thoughts. Her mind turned instead to the gift she had planned, a pair of cufflinks and the return of a pendant she'd found. She hesitated before speaking. "What do you think about cufflinks as a gift?" she asked, her tone casual, but her cheeks turning pink. Max raised an eyebrow at her question, clearly caught off guard. Jubilian, flustered, quickly hid her face behind her book. "Why isn't he saying anything?" she wondered nervously. Max leaned forward and tugged the book away, his gaze sharp. "Who are you planning to give them to?" Jubilian was surprised by how quickly Max moved, considering he had just been lounging on the sofa. She reminded him that he should already know who she intended to give the cufflinks to. At that moment, Max recalled the report he had received about Jubilian's obsessive fixation on Mikhail. He wondered if Jubilian planned to cling to Mikhail yet again, and, without holding back, told her how pathetic she was. Jubilian's temper flared when Max questioned whether she was really planning to give a gift to a man like him. Jubilian, thinking he was talking about her father, dismissed Max's words as unnecessarily harsh. Max, however, hesitated, interpreting her reaction as an attempt to defend Mikhail. He pressed further, stating that she lacked self-respect and pride, accusing her of clinging to Mikhail. Irritated, Jubilian snapped back, clarifying that her intentions had nothing to do with clinging to anyone. "I want to give it to him so we can get along, since he is my father," she declared firmly. Max was taken aback. "Wait, you've been talking about Duke Regis this whole time?" he asked, perplexed. Jubilian gave him a questioning look and countered, "Who else would I be talking about?" At her response, a knowing smile spread across Max's face, as if a puzzle had just been solved. Jubilian, now thoroughly confused, asked herself, "Why is he smiling?" Max remarked that cufflinks were a useless gift for a swordsman, which only upset her further. "And you think you're so great at giving gifts?" Jubelian shot back. Max shrugged with an amused expression. "I recently gave my father something, and he seems to have regained his vitality in these last few years." Jubelian asked, "What did you give him?" Max replied dismissively, "You don't need to know." Then, as if trying to reassure her, he added, "The Duke will be happy with anything you give him." Jubelian, however, didn't seem convinced. Her skepticism was evident, and Max couldn't help but wonder if she truly understood how much Duke Regis cared for her. Jubelian, on the other hand, felt increasingly doubtful about her gift. It seemed insignificant. Max thought, he would sacrifice everything for his daughter. Does she even know that? He continued to reflect. So that's why you've gotten soft, teacher. Meanwhile, Duke Regis was resting on a tree branch when a small bird disturbed him, chirping loudly. He shooed it away, muttering to himself, "Jubelian doesn't like small animals." Just then, a knight approached with news about Jubelian. At the mention of her name, Duke Regis's demeanor shifted instantly, his expression tense. "What happened to her?" he demanded. The knight, sensing the Duke's anxiety, quickly reassured him. "The lady is safe, but she's feeling anxious because you haven't come home." Duke Regis was taken aback. "She was looking for me?" he asked, his tone softened by surprise. Jubelian had never expressed such concern before. Hearing this, a rare smile graced the Duke's face, a flicker of happiness lighting his features. But his relief was short-lived. The knight hesitated before adding, "She hasn't been feeling well, my lord. She's been staying in her room and hasn't gone out." Duke Regis's expression darkened instantly, his concern turning to resolve. He had tolerated enough of Max's antics and told the knight, "We'll meet the Emperor immediately." Hey guys, before we continue, if you've made it this far, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and drop a comment below. The Florian mansion, Max gave Jubelian advice that she didn't need to include a letter with her gift, but Jubelian insisted. To her, it felt rude to give a gift without a note. Frustrated after several failed attempts, Jubelian crumpled the letter she'd written and sighed, wondering what she could possibly write since she wasn't particularly close to her father. Desperate for guidance, Jubelian turned to Max for help. "What do you and my father talk about?" she asked. Max paused, memories of his teacher's endless conversations about Jubelian coming to mind. Despite his gruff demeanor, Duke Regis spoke about his daughter with such pride and affection that it had always baffled Max. Still, Max kept it simple. "We don't talk much," he said. Jubelian frowned, disappointed. "You're so useless," she muttered under her breath. After an hour of scribbling and editing, Jubelian finally finished her letter. Curious, Max asked to read it. As his eyes scanned the page, his brow furrowed. The letter was essentially an apology, Jubelian admitting her faults and asking for forgiveness. She seemed proud of her work, but Max wasn't so sure. Max didn't argue further, but couldn't shake the feeling that the Duke's reaction to the letter would be far from what Jubelian anticipated. Before leaving to deliver the letter and gift, Jubelian turned to Max. "Don't forget, if anyone comes into the room, you know what to do." Alone, Max leaned back, imagining his teacher's reaction to the letter. Meanwhile, at the Ashet Empire's palace drawing room, the Emperor glared at Duke Regis. "Why haven't I received a report from you after 4 days?" he demanded. Duke Regis stood stoically, unfazed by the Emperor's anger. "I couldn't find the source of the problem," he replied. The Emperor's frustration grew. He suspected the Duke was hiding something. Regis found the situation ironic. Regis knew the assassination attempts were orchestrated by Max to create tension between himself and the Emperor. But Regis wasn't afraid. The only reason he hadn't acted against the Emperor was that the timing wasn't right. "The assassins won't attack again," Regis reported calmly. The Emperor narrowed his eyes. "And why is that?" "Because the palace perimeter is secure. While I guarded the palace, no harm came to anyone." Still, the Emperor wasn't ready to let Regis leave. "Since you seem so concerned, I'll have you stay a little longer," the Emperor declared. Regis agreed to remain one more day, though he didn't believe the Emperor's excuse. The Emperor, recalling Duke Elios's advice, devised a new plan. He would summon the Crown Prince, Maximilian, under the guise of offering him the throne. In truth, the Emperor intended to use Maximilian as a pawn to counter Duke Regis. At the mansion, Jubelian made her way to her father's office, the gift and letter in hand. She hesitated for a moment, taking in the sheer size of the room. It's been so long since I've been here. Relieved that her father wasn't around, Jubelian approached his desk. She was about to set the gift down when something on the desk caught her eye. A list of candidates for something the Duke had been preparing. Her breath caught when she saw Max's name circled prominently. The gift slipped from her hands and landed on the floor with a thud. Why is his name circled? She wondered, her heart racing. A chilling thought crept into her mind. Is the Crown Prince supposed to be my partner? Jubelian trembled in fear. Her father had never spoken to her about potential marriages, but she recalled the time he asked about her ideal type. To her growing unease, everything she had mentioned seemed to align with the Crown Prince. Maximilian Cassin Ashet, the Empire's Crown Prince. Jubelian thought of him as a man of skill, honor, and a distinguished family name. Yet, he was also infamous for being a ruthless killer who sought his father's position without hesitation, a man described as a bloodless, tearless psychopath. Jubelian shuddered as memories of his cruelty came to mind. The mere thought of being married to such a monster made her break into tears. She couldn't fathom a future where she was tied to someone like Maximilian. Meanwhile, Max sat in Jubelian's break room, waiting patiently for her return. As time passed, he found himself increasingly aware of how large the room was and wondered when she would finally come back. Suddenly, Max sensed an unfamiliar presence. In a flash, he grabbed the intruder by the throat, his grip ironclad. "Why are you here?" he demanded, his tone icy. The intruder, gasping for air, stammered, "The madam sent me." Max's eyes narrowed. "What's the message?" "The Emperor's movements are suspicious," the intruder confessed. Max smirked, assuming the disturbance was caused by the peculiar gift he had sent his father. But then the intruder added, "The Prime Minister and several minor officials are pressing for the Crown Prince's immediate return. It's time for you to go back." Max released the intruder, his mind already spinning with the implications of this new information. Jubelian, now seeing her father in a different light, hurriedly left his office. Her thoughts raced. My opponent is royalty now. Backing out won't be easy without a solid reason. Her best option was to convince her father to reconsider. But for that, she needed an undeniable excuse, something so compelling that he wouldn't be able to push the marriage forward. For now, she resolved to keep her discovery of the absurd list of candidates a secret. When Jubelian returned to her room, she immediately noticed that Max was no longer there. At first, she assumed he might be hiding somewhere, so she searched for him. Eventually, her eyes landed on a letter he had left behind on the table. Max's note was brief but clear. "Don't bother looking for me. I'll visit again soon." Jubelian felt a pang of disappointment. Max hadn't even said goodbye. A faint sense of loneliness crept over her as she held the letter in her hands, wondering why his sudden departure bothered her so much. Riding back, Max found himself wondering whether Jubelian had read the letter he had left behind. He was puzzled by his own actions. Why had he written her a letter in the first place? He doubted she would bother looking for him, and reasoned that his stay in her room had merely felt natural at the time. As the Florian mansion came into view one last time, Max glanced at it thoughtfully. He then instructed his men to take a shortcut back to the palace. "Let's go." There was something he needed to address immediately. The following morning, Jubelian awoke to find her room bathed in sunlight. She blinked in confusion, surprised that Max hadn't woken her as usual. Then she remembered. He was no longer at the mansion. A fleeting thought crossed her mind. I wonder where he went. Did he find somewhere else to stay? Shaking the thought away, she reminded herself that her current problems were far more pressing. Her gaze fell on the gift she had prepared for her father. Anxiety bubbled up as she imagined him questioning her about the pendant and becoming angry. Her chest tightened as she looked at the pendant. She resolved to return it as soon as possible, even though the mere thought of facing him left her drained. The servants began noticing Jubelian's odd behavior. She rarely left her room, looking increasingly dispirited with each passing day. Concerned, Marilyn approached her and suggested that a stroll in the pleasant weather might lift her spirits. "Shall I?" Jubilian asked with a sigh, which only deepened the maid's worry. Marilyn's mind wandered to memories of Jubilian as a child, hating the mansion because she was always alone. The maid teared up. Determined to cheer her up, Marilyn grabbed Jubilian's arms and hugged her, promising to stay by her side forever. When Jubilian sat outside to have tea, Marilyn noticed the strawberry cake, her favorite, was missing. Panicking, she ran off to the kitchen to prepare more before Jubilian could protest. Jubilian couldn't even stop her. Left alone, Jubilian exhaled quietly, grateful for a moment of solitude. Her mind drifted back to her most urgent tasks, handling the crown prince and returning the pendant. She resolved to come up with a strategy before any unforeseen complications arose. Yet, as she mulled over possible plans, she found herself at a loss once again. Jubilian flinched when she suddenly heard a familiar voice calling her name. Turning toward the sound, she froze. It was her father. Father? She couldn't hide her surprise. She hadn't expected him to return so soon. The servants had informed her that his absence might last longer. Gathering herself, she greeted him with a polite smile. "You must be tired from training," she said hesitantly. "Shall I call Marilyn to prepare your bath?" Or, she faltered for a moment, "Have you eaten yet? I could arrange a meal for you." The words tumbled out in a rush, her mind scrambling to process the situation. Her father's expression softened, and his response left her speechless. "From now on," he said, his voice steady, "I'll never leave you alone again." Jubilian was taken aback by Duke Regis's unexpected words, wondering why he would express such concern after all this time. Before she could fully process it, the Duke asked if she had eaten yet. When she admitted she hadn't, he frowned slightly and said, "Even if I'm not home, you must take care of yourself. I don't want to hear that you fainted again." Jubilian misinterpreted his words, assuming his concern was not for her well-being, but rather to ensure she stayed healthy enough to marry the crown prince. When the Duke added, "Never faint again," the sternness in his tone made her flinch. She thought he was forbidding her from getting sick. To her surprise, the Duke extended his hand and said, "Let's have a meal together." Though her earlier fears lingered, Jubilian hesitantly took his hand, her curiosity piqued by the rare gesture. Memories from her previous life came to mind, the moment when her father had taken her hand as she was being dragged to prison. A sadness weighed on her as she thought, "How foolish of me to expect kindness from him." In the past, Jubilian had desperately sought her father's love, trailing after him endlessly. But now, she realized such efforts were meaningless. During their meal, the air between them felt heavy with awkwardness. Jubilian couldn't remember a time when the two of them had eaten alone like this. The Duke broke the silence. "You're attending a party soon, aren't you?" She hadn't expected him to know. "Yes, it's for Rosemary's birthday," she replied. The Duke nodded. "And your partner?" Jubilian's heart sank. She hadn't yet found one, and she dreaded the possibility that her father would force her to attend with one of his chosen candidates. Gathering her composure, she said, "I've received a request to be someone's partner. I think it's a good opportunity." The Duke's eyes narrowed, his cold gaze unsettling her. Jubilian couldn't tell if she had successfully dodged his question or if he was simply displeased. To avoid further scrutiny, she hastily finished her meal and excused herself, intent on writing the letter she had promised her father. After resting briefly, Jubilian realized she had received far more partner requests than anticipated. Marilyn, her maid, listed the suitors one by one. First, there's Sir Cerbomere of the Imperial Knights. Then Count Lone's son, Edmund, who's famous for his handsome appearance and beautiful voice. Lastly, there's Marquis Crocus's son, who is next in line for the Foreign Office. Jubilian mulled over her options. All the men seemed like good choices, but with her father's expectations looming over her, she decided on Edmund. His reputation and charm seemed safe enough, and she instructed Marilyn to send a letter to him the next morning, as it was already late. As Marilyn left Jubilian's room with the letter in hand, she was startled to find Duke Regis standing in the hallway. "Is Jubilian still awake?" he asked, his tone neutral. "If you wish to speak with her, I can let her know," Marilyn offered, bowing. The Duke's eyes shifted to the letter Marilyn was holding. "Has she decided who her partner will be?" Marilyn answered. "Yes, she will be attending with Count Lone's son, Edmund." The Duke's expression darkened slightly. What do you know of Edmund's reputation? Marilyn smiled. He's well known for his handsome face and excellent manners. He's quite popular and is said to be a great man. She continued to gush about Edmund's virtues, but by the time she realized, the Duke was already gone. At Count Lone's residence, Edmund was pacing nervously. Edmund greeted him with a trembling voice. To what do I owe this honor, Your Grace? The Duke's icy stare silenced Edmund, who immediately began adjusting his posture and clothing under the weight of the scrutiny. Wherever the Duke's gaze landed, Edmund anxiously fidgeted, trying to correct himself. Finally, the Duke spoke. Jubilian has chosen you as her partner for Rosemarie's party. Edmund straightened, ready to bow in gratitude. But the Duke continued, I have one question for you. Do you meet her standards? Edmund blinked, flustered. I hope I do, Your Grace. The Duke's sharp gaze bore into him. Jubilian's conditions are clear, and while I see you possess some admirable traits, you fall short. A new day began at the Florian mansion. Marilyn entered Jubilian's room with a cheerful expression, announcing that the commission piece from the feeder workshop had finally arrived. It was from Ian, the helpless craftsman from before. Jubilian felt relieved. It had come just in time for Rosemarie's birthday. Jubilian looked at the note and was surprised by what was written. The maids, their curiosity piqued, gathered around to admire the exquisite item. They couldn't hide their fascination and began asking what it was. Jubilian smiled and told them she would reveal its function later, teasing them with suspense. Their chatter was interrupted by the butler, Derek. My lady, he began, Sir Edmund has arrived. He wishes to deliver his response to your letter in person. Jubilian blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected Edmund to respond face to face. Still, she thought to herself that it was the proper way to handle such matters, a testament to Edmund's good manners. After quickly preparing herself, Jubilian joined Edmund in the drawing room, with Marilyn escorting them. As she greeted Edmund, she couldn't help but notice his handsome features. Though not as striking as Mikhail, she thought, Edmund was still quite charming. However, her thoughts soon drifted to Max. His appearance was undeniably captivating, despite his infuriating lack of manners. Caught up in thoughts of Max, Jubilian was startled when Edmund spoke, snapping her attention back to the moment. Lady Jubilian, he began, his expression apologetic. I must admit, I thought you had already found a partner, and I agreed to attend the party with another. Jubilian stared at him, taken aback. She hadn't expected this outcome. You already have a partner? She asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Edmund bowed, guilt written all over his face. I had heard rumors, he explained. They say you are already seeing someone, so I assumed you wouldn't need a partner. Jubilian froze. Rumors? About me? A homebody who barely left the mansion? It sounded absurd. She quickly realized that someone must have seen Max and jumped to conclusions. Composing herself, she asked, And is there any evidence to support these rumors? Edmund hesitated before responding. No, my lady, they are only rumors. I deeply apologize for my misunderstanding. Though disappointed, Jubilian maintained her composure. It's fine, she said calmly. I'll simply find another partner. She tried to see the situation positively. At least now, she was aware of the ridiculous gossip spreading through high society. Still, she silently vowed to find whoever started the rumors and deal with them accordingly. Edmund looked visibly relieved at her forgiveness. Lady Jubilian, you are truly gracious, he said earnestly. If I had met your standards, I would have stayed by your side until the end. Jubilian gave a polite smile, but before she could respond, Edmund took out a rose and offered it to her. Would you care to have a meal with me? He asked. Before she could answer, Edmund suddenly stood, his demeanor changing. His eyes widened in panic as he caught sight of Duke Regis standing nearby, his piercing gaze fixed on him. Edmund stammered a quick farewell and hurriedly left, leaving Jubilian puzzled by his abrupt departure. Meanwhile, at Salon Bloom's, a group of noblewomen gathered to gossip about the upcoming party. They speculated about how Count Arlo would outdo his previous year's flamboyant rose decorations, but their conversations soon turned to Jubilian. I wonder who Lady Jubilian will attend with, one woman said slyly. Another chimed in, Have you heard the rumors? They say she's already seeing someone in secret. Overhearing the gossip, a mysterious noble grew visibly irritated. He slammed his wineglass down, causing the room to fall silent. Are you satisfied with your baseless words? He asked coldly. One lady attempted to defend herself. But a witness claims to have seen her with someone? The noble's glare sharpened. And did you see it with your own eyes? The women fell silent under his intense gaze, but another whispered, Lady Jubelion's behavior has always been improper. That's why these rumors make sense. The noble's jaw tightened in frustration. Say that to her face, if you dare, he challenged. The room fell completely silent, the women averting their eyes. One by one, they turned away and resumed their own conversations, pretending as if nothing had happened. With a final glare, the noble stormed out, unable to bear their slander any longer. Madame Frisia's usually calm demeanor cracked in surprise when she saw Max return to Salon Blooms. My, back so soon, Your Highness? Have you come to gather more interesting tidbits? His piercing gaze swept over the room. No, Max responded curtly. I won't be stepping into this place again. The standards here are deplorable. Frisia raised an eyebrow. Deplorable, you say? What gossip were you expecting to find then? Surely you can't be dissatisfied with the information about Lady Jubelion? Max's voice grew cold. Dogs barking endlessly, that's what these so-called nobles are. Someone needs to shut them up. Frisia tilted her head in curiosity. And what would Your Highness like to know about Lady Jubelion? Max stared at her. I want the truth, he demanded. What's this nonsense about her having a lover? Madame Frisia clasped her hands together. Ah, that rumor is false. Lady Jubelion recently sent a letter to Count Lorraine requesting him to be her partner for the upcoming banquet. Count Lorraine? Max repeated, his brow furrowing. Why him, of all people? Well, Frisia explained, he's handsome and well-mannered, with a certain charm that appeals to many ladies. But according to rumors, the Count is a notorious playboy who has left a trail of broken hearts behind him. Max scoffed. Of course, Jubelion must have been dazzled by his pretty face. When Frisia added that the Count had declined Jubelion's proposal, Max's expression turned thunderous. He rejected her? He snapped, barely containing his outrage. Yes, Frisia confirmed. And that's not all. The most recent rumor came from Droyle, Mikhail's cousin. He's been spreading claims that Lady Jubelion is having an affair with an undisclosed lover. At the mention of Mikhail's name, Max's jaw tightened. Find out everything you can about Droyle and Mikhail, their weaknesses, their secrets, and I want the names of every man Jubelion considered for the banquet. Frisia opened her mouth to speak, but Max had already stormed out, leaving her in stunned silence. At the Florian mansion, Jubelion sat stiffly across from her father, a teacup in hand. She felt trapped. Count Lorraine's rejection had left her uneasy, and now Duke Regis's probing questions only added to her discomfort. Have you found a partner yet? The Duke asked, his tone neutral but his gaze sharp. Jubelion hesitated, her heart pounding. If she admitted to being rejected, her father might insist on choosing someone from the dreaded candidate list. I'm still considering, she replied carefully. The Duke's expression darkened slightly. If you cannot find a suitable partner, you must inform me, he said firmly. The veiled threat in his words made Jubelion shiver. She wanted nothing more than to escape the suffocating atmosphere, but the Duke spoke again before she could excuse herself. I'll be heading out later. There's a matter that requires my attention. What kind of matter? Jubelion asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Duke's gaze softened slightly. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. Just giving a warning to someone who needs it. Jubelion's blood ran cold. She forced a smile and said, Please, come home safely, father. Her thoughts spiraled as soon as he left. Unbeknownst to Jubelion, Max had been perched on a sturdy tree branch outside her window, observing the Duke's departure. Once the coast was clear, he leaped gracefully onto the balcony. Peering inside, he scanned the room, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Max stood in Jubelion's room, hesitating. He hadn't expected to worry about her, yet the thought that she might have left to seek another partner unsettled him. Max? A voice from behind startled him. He turned swiftly to see Jubelion standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. What are you doing in my room? She asked. Without answering, Max took a step closer. Where were you? His tone was firmer than he intended. Jubelion blinked, surprised by his sudden proximity. I was just downstairs, she replied. Max let out a quiet breath, relieved. Seeing his reaction, Jubelion found herself at a loss for words. She hadn't expected the letter Max left to be real. Had he been kicked out of his home again? She sighed, burdened by her own troubles. Why did you sigh? Max's voice was close again, and she flinched slightly at his sudden nearness. If something's bothering you, I'll listen, he said. I promise I won't tell anyone. Jubelian wondered if confiding in him would ease her mind, just like last time. Testing him, she said, then promise me this. If you ever tell my father, you'll owe me 100 bars of gold. Max smirked. If I break my promise, you can have everything I own. At that, Jubelian laughed. Everything? You don't even have a house. Max flushed, embarrassed. Just tell me already. Jubelian hesitated before finally speaking. There's a nasty rumor going around. They're saying Lady Flyoyan is having an affair with some unknown man. She sighed. I don't care about the rumors. They're false anyway. But it seems the potential partners I was considering have all backed away because of them. Max scowled. Idiots. Believing such useless gossip, he clenched his fists. If he were one of those so-called suitors, he wouldn't abandon her. He'd protect her. Then, suddenly, he imagined it, attending the banquet at Jubelian's side. He felt his cheeks heat up. Jubelian continued, unaware of his inner turmoil. The real issue isn't the banquet, it's my father. He wants me to get married. Max stiffened. What? I saw the list of candidates, she said, her voice hollow. He's already chosen my partner. Rage flickered in Max's eyes. So the Duke was using his daughter for a political marriage? Pretending to value her while making deals behind her back? Jubelian crossed her arms. I need to find a suitable partner before my father forces me into something I don't want. Max met her gaze. There might be a potential partner nearby, he said carefully. Jubelian raised a brow. Nearby? Their eyes locked. For a moment, Max's heart pounded. Maybe, just maybe, this was his chance. But then Jubelian spoke. Oh, I see. Yes, there is someone. She smiled. Thanks for the idea, Max. Max's stomach twisted. I'll have to ask Geraldine to be my partner, she said. His dreams crumbled in an instant. Who is Geraldine? His voice was cold. Silence filled the room for a moment before Jubelian told Max that Geraldine was her distant cousin and her night guard. Most people already knew Geraldine's face since he always accompanied Jubelian whenever she went out. She had already formulated a plan. She would convince her father to accept her decision to have Geraldine accompany her to the banquet. Not only would he protect her from slander, but because they were cousins, no romantic rumors would arise. For a second, Max felt relieved by her decision. Then, confusion struck him. Why did it matter to him? It had nothing to do with him. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted when Jubelian smiled and thanked him for simply listening to her problems. Max's heart skipped a beat. Feeling strange for some reason, he quickly stood up and left the room. Before he could go, Jubelian stopped him and handed him a small pouch. Curious, Max opened it, only to find gold coins inside. He frowned. What is this? Jubelian tilted her head. I just thought you might need it. Realization struck. She thought he was poor. Max's face burned red, but he only nodded in response. Meanwhile, Jubelian thought he looked like a cute black cat sulking. As the sun began to set, another potential suitor was on his way to the Flyoyan mansion. But just as his carriage approached, it came to a sudden halt. The horses reared up, throwing the carriage off balance. What's going on? The man demanded. To his shock, Duke Regis himself stood in his path. His piercing gaze locked onto him. You are Ronald Herman Crocos, correct? The Duke asked. The two men exchanged wary glances. Duke Regis had no intention of letting Ronald enter his home. After a tense exchange, Ronald finally asked, Why am I unqualified to be your daughter's partner? Why are you warning me to stay away from her? A few minutes ago, another candidate, Boromir, had received the same treatment, and with just one sentence from the Duke, he had backed off immediately. But Ronald wasn't so easily deterred. Smirking, he said, I believe I'm Jubelian's only remaining option. The Duke's expression darkened instantly. At the mention of his daughter's name, his aura flared, suffocating and deadly. Say her name again, he ordered, his voice sharp as a blade. His glare alone sent a chill down Ronald's spine. It was a warning. A single mistake, and the Duke would not hesitate to strike. Realizing the danger he was in, Ronald swallowed hard and immediately retreated. After calming down, Duke Regis made a decision. None of the current candidates were acceptable. He would have Derek draft a new list by the end of the night. Meanwhile, Jubelian had devised her own plan. She had recently discovered the source of the rumors, Droyle. He was the only one who had seen the cufflinks she had intended to give her father. For now, she decided to gauge her father's mood before presenting them. When she finally approached him, he raised an eyebrow. "Why are you looking for me?" Jubilian held out an item. "I wanted to return your pendant." The Duke glanced at it, his expression unreadable. "So you had this." Then she handed him another item, the cufflinks. For a moment, the Duke was completely silent. Jubilian hesitated. "I saw these while shopping and thought they'd look good on you." The Duke remained dead silent. Doubt crept into Jubilian's mind. Is my plan really going to work? Taking a deep breath, she carefully brought up the real reason she had come. About the partner. Before she could finish, the Duke cut her off. "I see," he said. "If that's what you want, then I'll attend the banquet with you." Jubilian froze. Her father's words left her utterly speechless. She had been about to ask for permission to take Geraldine as her partner. But somehow, the Duke had completely misunderstood. Nightfall. That night, Frisia was curious about what was troubling Max. He had been unusually silent, his expression unreadable. Max, however, was irritated. He couldn't stop thinking about Jubilian. When Frisia finally asked if something was wrong, he snapped, "Don't pry into my business. Just report." Frisia nodded and relayed her findings. "There's nothing new to report, except about your temporary replacement. They're beginning to suspect Victor isn't the real crown prince. He can't keep up the act much longer, my lord." Max smirked. He managed to fool them for years, but now they suddenly grow sharp? Frisia then mentioned another pressing matter. Jubilian will likely be the main topic of gossip at the banquet since she's attending. Lady Floyan is the only stain on Duke Floyan's reputation. If she appears, it'll be the perfect opportunity for people to slander her. Moreover, there are rumors about her dating. Max cut her off. "That's enough. No need to go into such details." Frisia tilted her head in confusion, but he was the one who told me to report even the smallest details before. When she mentioned that she would take her leave to inform Victor, Max stopped her. "Not yet. I have an important task for you." The day of Duke Aurello's banquet had arrived, and the noble ladies had gathered, eager to socialize. Frisia, now in disguise, carried out the task Max had assigned her, protecting Jubilian from the slander of the noblewomen. Inside, she felt like nothing more than an overworked servant. The ladies chatted about how beautiful the roses were, but Frisia saw through them. They were really just waiting for Jubilian and her partner to arrive. All eyes remained fixed on the door, anticipation thick in the air. "Who do you think Lady Jubilian's partner is?" one woman mused. Frisia quickly intercepted their gossip. "She recently ended things with Mikhail. She's likely choosing a much safer option to avoid further rumors. She might attend with her cousin Geraldine, or she could arrive alone." The noble ladies nodded, murmuring their agreement. One of them sighed wistfully. "Lady Jubilian's love story is like a maze." Frisia smirked. "Then we'll just have to find out who the owner of the cufflinks she bought is, won't we?" With that, Frisia successfully redirected the conversation, steering it away from slandering Jubilian. However, the topic soon shifted to Mikhail. The ladies were eager to see how he would react upon seeing Jubilian again. Then, to Frisia's dismay, the women speculated that Mikhail might be the owner of the cufflinks, reigniting another round of rumors. She felt drained. Stopping gossip was proving to be a losing battle. Meanwhile, Mikhail stood alone, his expression dark. His patience was wearing thin as he waited for Jubilian to arrive. He needed to know who was she bringing as her partner. On the way to the banquet, Duke Regis turned to his daughter. "You don't need to concern yourself with the slander. I will protect you." Jubilian stared at him in surprise, but said nothing. When they arrived, the Duke stepped out of the carriage first, then turned and offered his hand to her. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before taking it. Together, father and daughter made their way into the banquet hall. A hushed silence spread through the crowd. Duke Regis was attending a banquet? That alone was shocking. But more than that, was he Jubilian's partner? Whispers rippled through the room. But they were quickly silenced as Duke Regis and Jubilian were formally introduced. Jubilian remembered her past life, how she had been nothing more than a side character, yearning for love yet abandoned by the very person she cherished and rejected by her own father. In the end, she had died a pitiful death. But in this second life, she had vowed to change everything. to escape and forge her own path. As she stood beside Duke Regis, the nobles were left in awe. His elegant presence commanded the entire room, leaving them speechless. Jubelian glanced at her father, unable to read his thoughts these days. His unpredictable nature had made it harder for her to anticipate his next move. As they ascended the steps, she nearly lost her footing, but the Duke caught her with ease. The light reflected off his cufflinks, drawing everyone's attention. A murmur spread through the crowd. Those cufflinks? They must be the ones Lady Jubelian gifted him. Yet some could not resist gossiping, whispering that she had only given him another pair to deflect rumors about her romantic involvement. However, when the Duke caught wind of the whispers, he cast a single cold glare in their direction. It was enough to send shivers down their spines. Meanwhile, Mikhail's gaze lingered on the cufflinks, a smirk curling on his lips. There's no way you'd be interested in any man apart from me. Unaware of the tension around her, Jubelian found herself admiring the grandeur of the mansion. This house is so beautiful, she thought. When I move out, I'll decorate mine just like this. Her excitement was evident as she looked around with fascination. Regis, noticing her expression, said in his usual firm tone, "Just enjoy yourself. There's no need to worry." She smiled. "I'm not worried at all." Then, as if to remind her, he added, "Don't forget, you are my daughter." Jubelian could sense it. Her father was fully prepared to protect her. At that moment, they were approached by Lady Arlo and her daughter, Rosemarie. Lady Arlo greeted them with a respectful smile. "It is an honor to have you both here." Meanwhile, Rosemarie hesitated for a second before quickly grabbing Jubelian's hand. "Thank you for coming to my birthday party," she said shyly. Jubelian found her adorable and grinned. "Happy birthday, Lady Rosemarie." She then presented her gift. As Rosemarie unwrapped it, the entire banquet hall watched in curiosity. It was a portable powder case with a mirror. Silence filled the room. Jubelian hesitated. Does she not like it? But then, Rosemarie's face lit up with delight. "I love it!" she exclaimed. She held it up for everyone to see. Gasps and murmurs spread through the hall. What a thoughtful and innovative gift! It's so practical and easy to use. Some noblewomen even whispered among themselves, wondering if this was the secret behind Lady Jubelian's beauty. Excited, Rosemarie turned to her. "Which workshop did you buy this from? I'd love to get one for my mother too." A sudden tension filled the air. In high society, nobles never revealed their workshop sources so easily. Everyone held their breath, waiting for Jubelian's response. Then, without hesitation, she replied, "Theodore Workshop. He may be young, but he is quite skilled." The room fell into stunned silence. Even a bald nobleman's head gleamed under the chandeliers. Meanwhile, Rosemarie, starry-eyed, imagined Jubelian as an angel descended from heaven. As the banquet carried on, lively music filled the hall, and the guests mingled, swept up in the festivities. Jubelian, however, finally found a quiet corner for herself, away from the endless conversations and prying eyes. She sighed. "I was asked way too many questions today." Hidden among the tree branches, Max observed her from a distance. His sharp eyes caught something unexpected. Jubelian was crying. Max's eyes widened slightly. Why is she crying? Unbeknownst to him, Jubelian cried whenever she yawned, and truthfully, she just wanted to go home. "Why are you crying?" Max asked. Jubelian turned sharply, shocked to see Max at the banquet. She stared at him in disbelief. What the heck is he doing here? Before she could ask, Max cut her off. He gently wiped her tears and said, "I don't know what happened, but don't cry. Did someone bother you?" Jubelian blinked in confusion. Max's expression darkened. "Tell me who it was, and I'll handle it." Jubelian felt even more bewildered. "Handle it? Are you planning to teach them a lesson?" "Of course," he replied without hesitation. She sighed. With his temperament, he could easily get himself executed. Jubelian had grown attached to Max and didn't want to see him harmed. If he truly wanted to help, she reasoned, he should start by fixing his speech, using honorifics and speaking more carefully in front of others. "Why would I do that?" Max scoffed. Jubelian crossed her arms. "Because words can make enemies or allies depending on how you use them." Max clicked his tongue. "Shh! Nobles are so sensitive. If their whole status system disappeared, no one would have to worry about something so trivial." "Maybe," she agreed. "But since that's not the world we live in, you should be careful." After some thought, Max begrudgingly agreed to adjust his speech. When Jubilian finally asked why he was at the banquet, he brushed it off, saying it was work-related. But in truth, he had come to check on her. Then, with a casual tone, he asked, "Why are you out here alone? Where's your partner?" To his surprise, she answered, "My partner is my father." Max was taken aback. He had assumed she would arrive with Geraldine, but the Duke's unpredictable nature had led to an unexpected outcome. Because of this, not a single noble dared ask Jubilian for a dance. Suddenly, Max extended his hand toward her. Jubilian hesitated. "Why are you holding out your hand?" Max smirked. "Can't you tell? I'm asking you to dance." Jubilian narrowed her eyes. "Can you even dance?" "You should feel honored," he said smugly. "I don't dance with just anyone." Jubilian's face turned red as she met his gaze. "I'll probably have to lead." But to her shock, Max moved with perfect grace. Their dance was mesmerizing. However, as they moved across the floor, Jubilian suddenly lost her footing. Max immediately caught her, his arms firm around her waist. "Why are you so distracted?" he murmured. Their faces were close, too close. They could feel each other's breath. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then, "Get away from her immediately!" A deep, furious voice shattered the moment. Both Max and Jubilian turned their heads. Standing before them was Duke Regis, his expression dark with rage. His voice thundered through the hall. "What the hell is this?" Hey guys, before we continue, if you've made it this far, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Your feedback helps a lot. Everyone surrounded the Duke, making it unbearably noisy for him. He had initially planned to spend a peaceful day with his daughter, but when he saw Jubilian stepping outside, he assumed she would be fine on her own. Mikhail, noticing Jubilian leaving, took it as a sign to follow her. However, before he could take another step, a single glare from Duke Regis stopped him in his tracks, sending a wave of panic through him. The sudden shift in the Duke's demeanor left Mikhail stunned. It was clear that the Duke simply didn't want him anywhere near his daughter. Realizing he had no chance, Mikhail flinched, then reluctantly retreated. After reading Mikhail's letter, the Duke made up his mind. He would never allow Mikhail near his daughter again. Mikhail left in a hurry, while the Duke calmly took a sip of his wine. Just as he was about to relax, something caught his attention. His eyes landed on Jubilian, gracefully dancing with a man. The Duke was momentarily impressed. The man dancing with Jubilian must be exceptionally skilled. After all, he had managed to evade the Duke's attention until now. Rather than interrupting, the Duke decided to let them finish their dance and investigate the man later. However, the moment he heard an alarming sound from Jubilian, his instincts flared. Fearing the worst, he sprinted toward her location. When he opened the door, he saw Max clenching Jubilian's hand. The sight made the Duke's blood boil. Without hesitation, he crushed the wine glass in his bare hand and, voice laced with warning, commanded Max to step away from his daughter. Both Jubilian and Max turned to him in shock. The Duke recalled the Empress's request for him to teach Max how to live, a request he had once accepted. But now, witnessing this scene, he reevaluated everything. Did Max harbor romantic feelings for Jubilian? Seeing his father's bleeding hand, Jubilian instinctively grabbed it, her face filled with concern. A warmth spread through the Duke. Despite the situation, he was glad to see his daughter worry about him. Meanwhile, Jubilian was puzzled as to why her father was outside. She struggled to stop his bleeding, all while feeling the lingering effects of the wine. The Duke reassured her, saying he would ask for details later, but for now, they needed to leave. Jubilian, relieved by the slight ease in her father's expression, attempted to step forward, only to wince. Max, noticing her pain, asked about her injury. But before he could do anything, the Duke immediately intervened, making it clear that he alone would take care of his daughter. Then, to Jubilian's utter shock, she suddenly found herself being carried. Before leaving, the Duke turned to Max with a final remark. "There's no need for you to visit my estate anymore," he declared. "I'll be the one to visit you instead." Jubilian, now mortified beyond words, felt her face burn with embarrassment as her father carried her through the crowd of nobles. She whispered urgently, "Father, you can put me down now." But the Duke refused. "You're injured," he said firmly. Jubilian groaned inwardly. He had completely misunderstood. She wasn't asking to be put down because she was fine, but because she was dying of embarrassment under the noble's watchful eyes. As the Duke carried her out of the ballroom, whispers quickly spread among the nobles. Some of the ladies wasted no time in gossiping, accusing Jubilian of deliberately causing a scene to steal attention away from Rosemary, the birthday celebrant. But Rosemary immediately defended her. Jubilian has been unwell lately, she reminded them. She may not have fully recovered yet. With Rosemary's influence, the gossip quickly shifted from criticism to concern. Mikhail, still lingering at the banquet, overheard the murmurs about Jubilian's frail health. For the first time, he recalled their past together, the moments when she struggled to keep up with him on walks, when she tired so easily. He had always dismissed her weakness, assuming she was merely pretending. But now? Was she truly sick all along? A twinge of guilt settled in his chest. Back at the Florian estate, the Duke firmly reminded Jubilian of the doctor's orders. She was to rest and stay indoors for the next few days. Jubilian, however, was puzzled. Why is he suddenly so concerned about my health? She had spent her entire life being ignored by him, yet now he was acting as if her well-being mattered. Then it hit her. He's only doing this because it benefits him. She realized the Duke wasn't being kind out of affection. He was ensuring that she remained in good health because of her newfound value in high society. Now that she was being considered as a potential bride for the Crown Prince, the marriage could only proceed if she was well. Jubilian had once thought that breaking up with Mikhail would free her from the looming death flags in her life. But now she saw the truth. Her father had simply exchanged one political pawn for another. And this time, the stakes were even higher. Fear gripped her. She could not allow herself to meet another tragic end. Meanwhile, at Salon Bloom's, Max found himself unable to stop thinking about Jubilian. His thoughts kept drifting back to the moment he had caught her mid-fall. What if I had kissed her back then? The mere idea made his face heat up. Freya, watching him closely, narrowed her eyes. You're acting strange. Max, ignoring her, simply ordered her to send a banquet invitation to Jubilian under her name. Freya sighed. That will be difficult right now. Max's brow furrowed. Why? Because she's currently very popular. Max's scowl deepened. At the Florian estate, Jubilian was overwhelmed by the sheer number of invitations flooding in. Why are so many people suddenly interested in me? Feeling drained, she decided to use her weak health as an excuse to decline them all. But then her maid presented her with one letter that required her immediate attention. The sender? The Hearn family. Jubilian froze. The Hearn family, relatives of the late Empress, had never sent a letter to her before. They always corresponded with her father. She suddenly felt a wave of unease. Is my father meeting with the Crown Prince right now? Her mind raced. She needed a plan to escape this arranged marriage. But before she could think of one, a familiar presence caught her attention. Standing outside her window was none other than Max. Jubilian's eyes narrowed in suspicion. How does he always manage to sneak into my room like this? Then she recalled something else. Her father had personally warned Max never to visit the estate again. An idea formed in her mind. With a deliberate misstep, she opened the window and clumsily tripped forward, straight into Max's arms. His hands instinctively steadied her, but before he could react, she looked up at him and with a teasing smile asked, Max, would you like to go on a date? Max was taken aback by Jubilian's sudden offer to go on a date. For the past week, he had been waiting for his teacher to leave Jubilian's home. He instinctively covered his mouth in shock, his face flushing. The thought crossed his mind, if she insisted, perhaps he could go out with her. Seeing Max's reaction, Jubilian was puzzled and quickly explained, it would be a contractual relationship. Max flinched, disappointment clear on his face. Jubilian stole a glance at Max, her thoughts wandering. He possesses all the qualities I asked my father to look for in a man, but she needed him to cooperate. Max, however, was fuming. To him, it felt like she was making a mockery of him. On the other hand, Jubilian simply wanted to ensure he was compensated for his time. Without hesitation, she told him, I'll pay you however much you want to go out with me. Her words stunned Max, his fury evident. Jubilian was surprised by his reaction. He clearly didn't like the idea. When she mentioned that he only needed to date her until she could leave the mansion on her own, Max became curious. Why was she going to such lengths to escape her home? Jubilian hesitated for a moment before answering, My father has already chosen my fiancé. I have to marry him. Can't you just refuse? Jubilian sighed. I want to decline, but he's someone I can't refuse. Max's curiosity deepened. Who is this man that even the Duke's daughter cannot reject? Jubilian hesitated before finally saying, Promise me you won't tell a soul. Max reassured her. You don't have to worry. I won't tell anyone. She took a deep breath. Maximilian Cassian Ashet. Max exhaled sharply. I'm nobody special, he muttered, then paused. Wait, did he hear his own name? Completely stunned, he asked in a panic. Are you sure it's the Crown Prince? Jubilian's expression remained calm. Maximilian is the Crown Prince. Max stood frozen, struggling to believe her words. Jubilian continued, explaining that the Crown Prince was the most likely candidate for her fiancé due to their shared noble status. More than that, he was the heir of the great Magus Ashet, the founder of the Empire. Ashet had once solved every problem in the Empire through magic, and his heir was revered like a god. The people's respect and fear for the Crown Prince were absolute. Given that, Jubilian had no power to reject the marriage. Defying the engagement would mean opposing the Empire itself, placing her and her family in direct conflict with the most powerful force in the land. That's why she had come up with this plan, to show her father that she was already involved with someone else. I can't reject the marriage first, she admitted. That would be defying the most powerful man in the Empire. Then, with an open heart, she added, I just need him to see me dating someone. She went on to explain, a woman with a scandal is undesirable. Even the Crown Prince wouldn't marry someone with a tarnished reputation. Hearing her reasoning, Max grew even more curious. It sounded like Jubilian despised the Crown Prince. Max then added, what if you're exactly the type of girl the Crown Prince likes? Jubilian was utterly shocked, unable to process his statement. Max pointed out that marrying the Crown Prince had its advantages. Beyond securing her status as future empress, she would have access to anything she could ever need. As he spoke, he blushed slightly. Jubilian was momentarily speechless. Then, after a brief pause, she thought to herself, then I'll just run away. Max's disappointment was evident. His expression said it all. I'll be leaving, he said, turning away. Jubilian still had no idea what was going through his mind. Before she could stop him, Max had already disappeared. Watching him leave, she couldn't help but wonder, had he just accepted or rejected her offer? Returning to Salon Bloom's, Max was frustrated, his bad mood evident. Freya, noticing his agitation, grew curious. Something bothering you? She asked. A problem you can't solve? Instead of answering directly, Max posed a question of his own. What does it mean when a girl wants to avoid and run away from her potential marriage partner? Freya was slightly taken aback. You're seriously asking me that? She studied him for a moment before replying, well, she must loathe the man. A lot. Max stiffened. He couldn't shake the thought. Did Jubilian really hate him that much? Sensing something amiss, Freya probed further. Does this have anything to do with Lady Florian? Max's expression darkened. Mind your own business. Freya smirked but didn't back down. Let me guess. You proposed to her, but instead of accepting, she ran away? Startled, Max immediately corrected her. I didn't propose. Jubilian did. The moment the words left his mouth, he regretted them. Freya's curious gaze locked onto him, and he swiftly changed the subject. Any news from the Emperor? Freya sighed. Nothing new. Your father still wants you to return home. Oh, and the Empress sent assassins after you again. Max barely reacted. And, for now, I've captured the assassin alive. What do you want me to do with him? Since childhood, Max's stepmother, Empress Isabella Rusty Ashton, had relentlessly tried to eliminate him. She was also the one responsible for the late Empress's death. Max considered executing the assassin and sending his severed head to the Empress as a warning. But then, he remembered Jubilian, how terrified she was of the Crown Prince. After a moment of contemplation, he changed his mind. Keep him alive. Freya's eyes widened. Really? She had known Max for years. He had never let a threat to his life go unpunished. Seemingly satisfied, Max then asked, Has anyone sent me a marriage proposal? Freya blinked in confusion. After a brief silence, she replied, No, no one has. Max frowned slightly. Disappointed, he left without another word. Freya watched him go, perplexed. What's gotten into him lately? At the Florian mansion, Jubilian once again was in an awkward situation. Jubillion sat across from her father, the Duke, picking at her food. She badly wanted to leave. When the Duke called her name, she quickly straightened up. "Yes, father?" She prayed he wouldn't bring up the marriage agreement. But instead of speaking immediately, the Duke studied her in silence, recalling the moment he had seen her with Max. Then, in a measured tone, he asked, "What do you think of the Crown Prince?" Jubillion paled. Anxiety twisted in her stomach. She still didn't know that Max was the Crown Prince, but her father assumed she did. Desperate to avoid the topic, she abruptly changed the subject. "Did you know about the founding history of our nation?" At the mention of the first emperor, the Duke's expression darkened. After a tense pause, he abruptly stood up. "I have urgent matters to attend to." Jubillion was taken aback. Her father never left the table after speaking just a few words. Outside, alone, the Duke clenched his fists. He had tried to endure, but he could no longer hold it in. Jubillion was learning about the imperial family. Even if history books didn't record everything, if she discovered anything, she would be in huge danger. The Duke was convinced. She had met Max. No matter how sheltered she was, she must have heard the terrible rumors about the Crown Prince. Would she still accept him, knowing who he truly was? The Duke's jaw tightened. He only wanted to protect his daughter. Suddenly, a voice called from behind. He turned, surprised to see Jubillion standing there. "What is it?" he asked. Jubillion hesitated. "You didn't look well. I was worried." In truth, she had chased after him because she suspected something was wrong. The Duke's expression softened. "She's worried about me?" Smiling, he removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "It's cold. Go back inside." But before she could leave, he added, "You should learn more about the Crown Prince." Jubillion froze. Fear gripped her. Her worst fears were confirmed. Her father wanted her to marry the Crown Prince. Even though she hated the idea, she couldn't bring herself to refuse him. "All right," she whispered, not realizing that her father actually wanted her to stay away from the Crown Prince. She bid him good night and returned to her room. Meanwhile, the Duke silently watched her. For Jubillion's happiness, I will never let her end up with Max. On the other hand, Jubillion made up her mind. She would ask Max again for a contractual relationship. Jubillion in her room was tired, then she was handed another letter. This time, it was from Rose Marie. The letter was the gratitude for the gifts she received and worry about her health. Jubillion read the letter carefully, feeling an unexpected warmth in her chest. She had assumed Rose Marie might be upset about her early departure from the party. Instead, Rose Marie was inquiring about her well-being. As she turned the letter over, she noticed an invitation. "A tea party," she murmured, tapping the paper thoughtfully. She had spent quite some time cooped up in her room. Perhaps this was a good opportunity to step out. Besides, she could use the gathering to pick up on any rumors about the Crown Prince, especially the things he disliked. That information could be useful. Meanwhile, at a noble gathering, Rose Marie shared news of Jubillion's health. "Lady Jubillion will be attending our tea party," she announced with a bright smile. Gasps and murmurs of excitement spread through the room. The noblewomen were eager to see her again. Rose Marie then turned to a particular noblewoman. "Veronica, the tea party will be held at your residence." Veronica hesitated, her expression stiffening. "My home?" she asked, clearly unenthusiastic about the idea. She despised Jubillion, but now she'll attend her home. She reluctantly agreed to it. After the gathering, Veronica let out a deep sigh. "That girl always decides things on her own," she muttered in frustration. Mikhail, who had been listening, told her that he was tired and that they could talk later. She then told him, "I invited Jubillion to my house." Mikhail stopped immediately, surprised. He stared at Veronica. She then said that she didn't want Jubillion at her tea party. Then all of a sudden, Mikhail came closer and gently touched her hair. With smooth words and effortless charm, he told Veronica to extend him an invitation too, because he'd be worried if Jubillion bullied her. Veronica, flustered but unable to refuse, eventually agreed and invited Mikhail to her tea party. Mikhail's lips curled into a satisfied smile. Finally, I'll get to meet her. On the lively streets of the arcade district, Jubillion found herself deep in thought. How extravagant will this tea party be? She mused. I need to find the right dress. But shopping proved difficult. Once again, she was surrounded by an escort of guards, making her worry about whether she could browse freely. As she sifted through luxurious gowns, she frowned. Too fancy. These are all too much. Every shop she visited had only extravagant dresses. Just then, a familiar voice cut through her thoughts. Those won't suit you. Jubilian turned to see Freya standing before her. The guards tensed at the sudden approach, while Geraldine was emotional. Since you are quite slender, I don't think it will suit your figure. Jubilian thought, she's right. Then she offered Freya a grateful smile. Thank you for the advice. Freya looked at her and thought she was even more beautiful up close. Meanwhile, Jubilian happily left. After making her selections, Jubilian completed her shopping, but as she stepped back onto the bustling street, a commotion erupted. A loud, arrogant voice rang out, drawing her attention. You dare speak to me like that? Apologize right now. Jubilian wondered, is there a guy bullying someone? She looked at the man on the ground while another guy told him that he had just fallen over on his own. Jubilian recognized the man at the center of the chaos, the notorious Baron, infamous among the Golden Society. But what truly shocked her was the person standing against him. Her breath caught. Max? What is he doing here? The Baron's insults grew harsher, his demands for the young man's arrest escalating. Jubilian couldn't let this continue. Stepping forward, she spoke with clear authority. That's enough. The crowd fell silent, all eyes turning toward her. And Max was caught by surprise. What is she doing here? The Baron's eyes widened when he saw Jubilian standing before him. Lady Jubilian, he stammered. As she introduced herself to the crowd, murmurs spread like wildfire. Nobles whispered among themselves, curious about the sudden turn of events. The Baron, realizing the gravity of the situation, immediately kneeled in respect. Jubilian crossed her arms, unimpressed. I know exactly who you are, Baron Golden, she said coolly. The Baron forced a smile, attempting to weave his usual cunning words to appease her. My lady, this is all a misunderstanding. Enough. Jubilian cut him off, her gaze sharp. She had heard of his reputation, trampling on those of lower status while groveling before the powerful. His sudden deference irritated her even more. Straightening her posture, she spoke firmly. In the name of my father, Duke Regis, I declare that no one shall lay a hand on my man. A wave of gasps rippled through the crowd. Max, standing beside her, turned red. Her? Man? Leaning closer, Jubilian quickly whispered, I will save you. Just trust me. Jubilian then turned to the Baron. Max is the knight my father assigned as my bodyguard, she declared. The Baron's face twisted in shock, while Jubilian's real guards exchanged confused glances. Messing with my guard was a mistake, Jubilian added, her tone threatening. Max felt a twinge of disappointment. So, I'm just her guard? The Baron, regaining some composure, tried to justify himself. My lady, it was he who pushed a noble. But the truth was evident. The Baron couldn't stand that Max was more attractive than him, so he had used his status to harass him. Little did he know, Max wasn't one to back down. Jubilian folded her arms. Apologize to him. The Baron stiffened. What? Max, meanwhile, was amused. Understanding the hierarchy and unspoken rules of noble society, Jubilian took a different approach. She sighed. I apologize on behalf of my guard. He is from the mountains. I take full responsibility for not educating him properly, she said, her voice calm yet authoritative. Max blinked. Wait, now I have a backstory too? The Baron smirked and asked for money. Jubilian countered, It will be even if you talk down to me just like my guard talked down to you. Max watched her in surprise, and so did the Baron. Panicking, he stammered, How could I? Max thought, She's smarter than she looks, while Jubilian simply waited for the Baron to insult her. But the Baron knew, if he insulted her, her father would kill him. He bowed deeply and apologized for the fuss he had caused. She then said, Tell that to my guard. The Baron clenched his fists, forcing a fake smile as he apologized. But inside, he was furious. However, Max was far more dangerous than him. One cold stare from Max made the Baron tremble. In panic, he quickly ran away. Jubilian then grabbed Max's arm and reassured him, Don't worry. Max thought, Why does she think someone like him could harm me? She wondered what Max was thinking. In truth, he was only thinking about her, the day she told him to speak politely to others. Jubilian glanced at him. Is he asleep? Suddenly, Max grabbed Jubilian's hand and thanked her for saving him. Gasps and sighs of admiration filled the air. Jubilian, on the other hand, was utterly baffled. What is he doing now? Then Max turned to her with a determined look and said, "Let's do it." The contractual relationship. As soon as the words Max's mouth, Jubilian clamped a hand over his lips. "Are you insane?" she hissed, glancing around nervously. The crowded street buzzed with murmurs as onlookers exchanged knowing glances. Now in the carriage heading toward the Floyan mansion, Jubilian turned to Max, arms crossed. "I thought you rejected the contract when you left without a word," she demanded. Max leaned back against the seat. "I didn't reject it," he thought. He remained silent, his gaze flickering for a brief moment. He wasn't about to tell her. The fact that she was going to make a contract with the man she hated, that much baffled Max. Jubilian frowned at his lack of response. "Fine. Then tell me, what were you even doing at the arcade street? That doesn't seem like your kind of place." Max's jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" he shot back. "I go wherever I want." Jubilian clenched her fist, exhaling slowly, thinking, "I literally helped you back then." Meanwhile, Max recalled the conversation he had with Freya. She had told him that Mikhail and Jubilian would both be attending an upcoming tea party. When she had implied that there might still be lingering feelings between them, Max had stormed off mid-training, unable to contain his fury. There was no way he was going to let Mikhail near her, and so he had made his decision. The dating contract was the perfect excuse to stay by her side and keep Mikhail away. Jubilian tilted her head, thinking, "What's with that look? What is he thinking?" Before she could press further, Max cut her off. "I should be asking you that. Why did you offer me the contract in the first place?" Jubilian hesitated. "Well, because you don't have a home, nor money, and you are also my father's student." Max was baffled hearing that. In shock, he wondered, was he the only one who was serious about this? Then she stated one more reason. "And you're the only person I can comfortably ask for something like this." Max's initial disappointment was brief, his lips curving into an uncontrollable smile. That reason alone was enough for him to agree. Jubilian, however, was still skeptical. His personality was questionable. "All right," she said, moving on. "Let's discuss your payment." "There's no need," Max interrupted, looking slightly annoyed. "Consider it repayment for taking care of my wounds before." Jubilian's eyes lit up. "So you'll cooperate with me?" Caught off guard, Max stiffened as she suddenly moved closer. "From now on, we will pretend to be lovers, okay?" What would happen if she found out that Max was the crown prince? This contract was starting to feel dangerously real. Jubilian continued, "Since we've started this agreement, we should act the part. We must hold hands, stay close, and you," she pointed at him, "must call my name passionately. Oh, and before I forget," Jubilian added, "we haven't properly introduced ourselves." "I already know who you are," Max cut in, his voice steady. Jubilian blinked in surprise, thinking, "You do? Then why hasn't he been addressing me properly?" Then Jubilian asked, "Your name is Max, right?" Clearly hiding his full name, he said, "Yes, it's Max." Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. A simple name, yet it carried weight. "He's bound to become a great man someday." She then told him, "Your parents picked the right name for you. It really suits you." But her admiration quickly faded when she mentioned the next step. "Let's write the contract." Max frowned. "A contract? Is that really necessary?" Jubilian huffed. "Did my father not teach him anything about formal agreements?" She then replied, "Contracts exist to ensure fairness and to protect both parties. What if I took advantage of you?" Max looked at her and said, "You won't do that I'm sure of." Jubilian's heart skipped a beat. His voice was calm, but there was an undeniable sincerity behind his words. She recalled her past life, how she had lived as a villainess, hated by everyone. But now the man in front of her completely trusted her. Jubilian wondered, did he really trust me that much? Then she took a deep breath and told him, "Most frauds are committed by people they trust. You should know that by now." Max then finally agreed to the agreement. She then considered teaching him some basic common sense during the duration of their contract. Then, an idea struck her. She leaned in, closing the space between them. "Before we sign, we need both of our mouths to match." Max's entire body tensed. "What?" His voice cracked slightly. His mind raced. "Is she serious? Is my first kiss really about to become some absurd contract ritual?" His heart pounded as she inched closer, only to whisper, "Geraldine is going to ask how we met. We need to agree on our story first." Then she turned, wondering if the carriage driver had heard them. He quickly composed himself, clearing his throat. Right, that's important. Jubelian raised an eyebrow as his face turned a deeper shade of red. Is it too hot for him in here? She wondered. As the carriage came to a halt, the guard stationed at the mansion stared in confusion. Lady Jubelian, who is this man? Jubelian straightened her posture and gestured toward Max. This is my lover, Geraldine, frustrated, said. Today is the first time I saw this man. Did you just pick him for his looks? Jubelian anticipated their skepticism and preemptively supplied an answer. We met at Count Magin's banquet, Geraldine frowned. Count Magin? Is he a noble? He looks like a noble to me. Jubelian nodded. But Max isn't a noble. He's just a mercenary. A collective silence fell over the guards. A mercenary? Geraldine's expression darkened. And how did a mercenary get close to you, my lady? Max clenched his jaw. He hated when people questioned his presence, especially those unaware of his true identity. Just before, on the way here, Max and Jubelian had argued about who had saved whom first. She gave the reason that she had guards, and there was no way he could have saved her. She then patted him and told him, it will be all right. Naturally, she had won that argument, and Max agreed to it in the end. Now, she smirked and turned to Geraldine. I saved him. Jubelian then started her fake story. He was in great trouble as noble ladies surrounded him and wanted to put him in prison. Then, I suddenly emerged and saved him. Later, Max wanted to repay me for saving his life. The guards were in disbelief and whispered, She did save him earlier, didn't she? At first, I didn't think much of him. But after meeting him again at Count Orello's banquet and then at the arcade street, I realized. She turned dramatically toward Max. He's my destiny. Geraldine was visibly taken aback. She's serious about this? Jubelian caught their doubtful expressions. What? Do you all think he's unworthy just because he's a commoner? She gave them a haughty glare, trying to assert dominance. But in reality, the guards were more focused on Max, whose sharp eyes and tense demeanor exuded an unsettling presence. Geraldine studied him carefully. Something about his aura felt familiar. Jubelian then asked him, Are you all right? He immediately steadied himself. I'm fine. Jubelian smiled. Don't worry, no matter what happens, I'll protect you. Max stiffened. Protect me? The sheer irony was almost amusing, and yet the way she said it was oddly satisfying. As they headed inside, a real shock occurred. From the mansion's entrance, a terrifying presence loomed. Panicked. The Duke. His eyes locked onto them, his expression a mix of trembling and shock. Jubelian, undeterred, smiled sweetly. Father, let me introduce you to my lover, Max. The Duke's entire frame stiffened. Max exhaled slowly. This is going to be a problem. Max and Jubelian stood tensely in the grand hallway. A chill aura surrounded the Duke. Before Max could offer a greeting, the Duke's voice boomed across the space. What is going on here? Duke Regis's sharp glare sliced through the air like a blade. Jubelian, startled, thought, Why does he look so angry? Is it because I didn't choose the man he wanted for me? She wondered. But I chose his student. Surely that should count for something. Grabbing Max's arm, she answered calmly, Max and I, we're officially dating. The Duke's expression immediately darkened, his jaw tightening. It was clear, he was not pleased. Why does he look pissed? She wondered. Later, in the dining room, Max quietly pulled out Jubelian's chair for her. She gave him a small smile. Thank you, Max. The Duke watched the exchange with growing irritation. Max's respectful demeanor only made things worse. He saw it not as courtesy, but as seduction. He's playing a game, the Duke thought grimly. He always does. He remembered all too well how ruthless Max could be. A man who crushed enemies without hesitation, who never showed mercy. The idea that Max might be using his daughter as a pawn in some grand scheme twisted his stomach. How did you two meet? The Duke asked, voice laced with suspicion. Jubelian hesitated slightly. She knew this was only the beginning. She knew all too well that her father was no fool. She would need to mix truth with lies. Max came to see you one day, she said smoothly. But you were out, so I let him stay for a while. We got to know each other. The Duke spilled his tea in shock. He froze. His eyes narrowed. He stayed in her room? There was nowhere else available at the time, she added quickly. But nothing happened. But the Duke's mind was already racing to the worst-case scenario. His hands clenched beneath the table. He imagined his daughter alone in a room with Max, and rage boiled beneath his calm exterior. Max met his gaze, totally uncomfortable. It was late, Jubilian added. I didn't want to wake anyone, and I knew he wouldn't hurt me. This punk is the most dangerous person there is, the Duke thought. He's always been dangerous. No matter how many times he'd tried to steer Max toward decency, he always reverted to brutality. If I'm right, the Duke thought, he'll endanger Jubilian without hesitation. He stared at his daughter, wondering, what if he turns on her? He hated himself for allowing Max into their lives. Then, Jubilian broke the silence. I liked Max from the first moment I saw him, she said, voice soft but firm. I thought it was a miracle that the person I loved actually loved me back. I know I've made selfish choices in the past, she went on, and maybe I've embarrassed you before, but I would never do anything to ruin your reputation. Please, just accept our relationship. Then he remembered her as a child and thought, she is my beloved daughter. She could never harm me. He clenched his fist. I will not allow you to date Max. Break up with him, immediately. Jubilian's heart sank. Her plan had failed. She had believed that choosing Max, his own student, would soften her father's stance. So this is really about the Crown Prince? She wondered. She realized now that her father would never fully believe in her transformation, that in his eyes her value still lay in her political potential. Then Max grabbed her hand, which surprised Jubilian. Facing the Duke, he said with unwavering resolve, we won't be breaking up. Jubilian was speechless. The Duke clenched his jaw. Both Duke Regis and Jubilian were taken aback by Max's bold declaration. Max stood firm, eyes locked with the Duke's. You once told me, he began, voice steady, that swordsmanship exists to protect what we treasure, that we become stronger to defend our weaknesses. The Duke didn't respond, but his brows furrowed. Max gently wrapped his arm around Jubilian. I've found the person I want to protect. She's my weakness and my strength. Before Max could continue, Duke Regis cut him off sharply. Enough, the Duke snapped. Don't speak such nonsense in front of me. Max's patience had worn thin. If you keep opposing us without reason, I won't hold back anymore. I don't care if you were my teacher. The Duke's eyes flared. Then I no longer consider you my disciple. Jubilian gasped. What just happened? This was never part of the plan. All she wanted was a temporary dating contract to avoid a political marriage. But now, her father had just disowned Max right before her eyes. Max didn't flinch. He reached for Jubilian's hand. Let's go. As the two turned to leave, the Duke stepped forward and grabbed Max's shoulder. Stop! Max glared back at him. Don't tell me what to do. Jubilian looked between them in disbelief. This is spiraling out of control. She thought if they leave like this, they would never be welcome back. She then told the Duke, Father, please, I'll handle this. She looked at him with a disappointed look, to which the Duke hesitated. Then slowly, he released Max and let them walk away. Outside the room, Jubilian stopped and turned to Max. Max, I need to talk to you. It's really important. He paused and asked, What is it? Thank you for standing up for me. Then added firmly, but the way you spoke to my father crossed a line. Max frowned, caught off guard. I was trying to help you. Help doesn't mean speaking over me or disrespecting him, she said. You acted on your own again. That's not helping, Max. That's forcing your will. Max then asked, So you're saying you don't want my help anymore? She gently took his hand. I do, but this isn't how we fix things. At dinner, you were too extreme. There's another way. Max tilted his head. What do you mean? Jubilian wondered. Someone has to start. And I know apologizing first isn't exactly his strong suit. You need to reconcile with my father. Max's jaw tightened. You want me to apologize to him? She nodded. Yes. When Jubilian looked at him with her big, beautiful eyes, he just stared at her for a long moment before finally sighing and said, Fine, I'll do it. From the shadows, Duke Regis had been watching. He actually listened to her. He couldn't remember the last time Max had yielded to anyone. Has he really changed? He wondered. A while later, Max and Jubilian returned. She stepped forward. Father, Max has something he wants to say. The Duke thought, I've known this punk for 10 years. There's no way he has changed. Max hesitated, then bowed his head. I apologize, teacher, for my disrespect. Duke Regis was silent and thought, this boy, just a few months ago, he told me vulnerability was a weakness, and now he's apologizing for the first time in his life. The Duke's gaze narrowed. Is this genuine or just another manipulation? He crossed his arms. I don't remember ever having a disciple. The word stung. But Max understood the message loud and clear. He also realized something else. Jubilian had misunderstood her father's intentions from the beginning. Duke Regis had never wanted her to be with someone like him. But Max didn't correct her. He wasn't going to defend the Duke. Jubilian looked between them, her heart sinking. There's no fixing this, is there? She then came up with an idea. With no other option, she stepped forward, bent her knees, and knelt before her father. I'm sorry, father, she said quietly. This is my fault. If you must be angry at me. When Jubilian knelt and apologized on Max's behalf, both the Duke and Max froze. She needed a new strategy, a way forward. But for now, taking the blame was the only move she had. Max's eyes widened in panic. Jubilian, what are you doing? He stepped forward. Get up, please. This is my responsibility. She looked up at him, puzzled by his anxious expression. You don't know how terrifying he can be when he's truly angry, she muttered to herself. Still kneeling, she stayed firm. Then, to her shock, Duke Regis exhaled and stepped forward. All right, he said at last. Now stand up, Jubilian. She blinked. That was too easy. He's never been like this before, she thought. Is he changing? Both Max and the Duke were visibly uneasy, as if her continued kneeling made them more uncomfortable than the argument ever had. Still unsure if her father's forgiveness extended to Max, Jubilian turned to him again. I'll take responsibility for what happened, but please forgive Max as well. To her surprise, the Duke accepted without hesitation. Just like that? She could barely believe it. Even more confusing, Max and the Duke were now practically begging her to stand up. Once seated, Jubilian wondered if her father had really forgiven Max. Then the Duke's expression turned stern once more. It was clear. He still didn't approve of their relationship. Jubilian took a deep breath. I didn't expect you to, she admitted. But even if you won't approve right now, please just wait and see, Father. Duke Regis didn't respond right away. His jaw clenched slightly. He couldn't say no to his daughter like that, and Max was, after all, his student. Then the Duke's gaze flickered to Max. If I slowly show her what Max is truly like, then this whole relationship could crumble. Fine, I will not oppose you. Jubilian and Max stared at the Duke, stunned. Jubilian grabbed her father's hand and thanked him. The Duke looked at Jubilian and thought, for your happiness, I will not let this relationship last long. Later, in Jubilian's room, she smiled at the sight of sweets prepared just for her, a silent victory celebration. For once, she felt like she'd managed to outwit her cold-blooded father. With her father's reluctant approval, it was time to address the terms of their dating contract. So, any terms you'd like to include? She asked. Max remained silent, sipping from his cup. Why is he quiet? Jubilian squinted at him. And why does he drink like a noble? Max frowned. How can they even call this tea? He muttered. Her image of him as a refined, noble figure instantly shattered. After tea, they moved on to draft the contract. Jubilian couldn't stop herself from giggling as she read Max's proposed terms. She was surprised. Seriously? She asked. You just want to make sure I don't meet other men? Max shrugged, not denying it. She scanned further and paused at one line. Jubilian will always call Max by his name. Jubilian looked up. Then you have to call me by my name too. Max flinched. After a moment's hesitation, he turned his face away and gave a small nod. A blush crept up his cheeks. As she finished reading through Max's version of the contract, she muttered, Some of this grammar is awful. Let me fix it. After editing and cleaning up the text, she slid the paper back to Max. Read through it. Let me know if there's anything else to change. Max took the contract, glanced at it, and tore it in half. Her eyes widened. That had taken her so long to write, and Max just tore it apart like it meant nothing. Her heart sank. He had tossed away her effort so carelessly, and then the realization struck her. He's always been like this, coming and going as he pleases, ignoring how I feel. She had only made this contract so she could have some control, so she wouldn't get hurt again. Her fists clenched. This won't work. She stood up. We're done, she said flatly. This contract, this whole arrangement, it's over. Max stared at her, confused. What are you saying? Max didn't want their contract to end. Not after everything they had gone through to get her father's permission. Jubilian, think about this, he said, voice laced with urgency. You hate the crown prince. You'd never agree to marry him. Don't you remember that? This isn't working. she finally said, her voice quiet but steady. You and I, we were never a match to begin with. Continuing this dating contract will only exhaust us both. Max frowned. You're just saying that because you're upset. No, it's not, she replied. You ripped up the contract like it meant nothing. You didn't even think about how much time I spent fixing it. I can't keep doing this, signing something with someone who treats me like that. Max's expression faltered. She wasn't wrong. When he was younger, he had a habit of tearing up his subordinates' reports without a second glance. It had become second nature. No one had ever told him to stop. He assumed they'd just write it again. But now, seeing how deeply it hurt Jubillion, he understood their pain. Would you be okay? She asked, her tone sharper now. If someone disregarded everything you put effort into, again and again, because that's what I really hate. Max's jaw tightened. So, you're upset by what I did? I'm tired of it, Max, she answered honestly, almost fed up. He didn't want to admit it, but her words hit him hard. He hadn't wanted to comply. Not because he disagreed with her, but because it was easier to act how he always had. If this is too difficult for you, she added, then go ahead. Cancel the contract. I'm the one who asked you for help, so I'll take responsibility. The silence that followed felt endless. Max assessed the situation carefully. If he agreed to cancel now, there was a very real chance he would never see her again. After watching Jubilion's gloomy and frowning face, he immediately apologized to Jubillion. Later that night, Max was calm, composed, and unexpectedly obedient. He sat across from her and signed the revised contract without complaint. Jubillion blinked. That was fast. Finally, the contract was complete, and Jubillion felt very happy, but Max was totally exhausted. Well, she said cheerfully, now that the contract is done, should we announce it? She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. Count Tyrant is hosting a tea party tomorrow. We'll go together. Max's expression immediately changed. Who else will be attending? Just Rosemary and her friends, she said, shrugging innocently. Max thought to himself, so she doesn't know that Mikhail's coming. All right, he said smoothly, I'll go. But in his mind, he was already planning. I'll crush Mikhail. I'll grind his pride into dust right in front of everyone. While Jubillion thought, why does he look so fired up? The next day at Count Tyrant's mansion, the tea party began. Rosemary and the other noble ladies were startled to see Mikhail arrive. Worse, he wasn't alone. He walked in beside Veronica, arm in arm. Veronica, Rosemary hissed, what's the meaning of this? The host can invite anyone she wishes after all. But the rest of us must approve of the guests beforehand, Rosemary shot back. Before things could escalate, Mikhail stepped in with a charming smile. I assure you, ladies, I'm only here to enjoy your company. And as always, he twisted words like a master. In no time, he'd won over one of Rosemary's friends, and then another. A few of the noble ladies even began to blush, caught up in his smooth manners. Mikhail smirked and put up a bright smile. Thank you, my ladies. Other than Rosemary, all were very delighted that Mikhail had joined the tea party. Rosemary frowned. If Jubillion sees him here, she'll be hurt again. But then... The grand doors opened. Every head turned to the figure. Mikhail's smile faded. His eyes locked onto the tall figure standing beside Jubillion. Max, he was gently holding her hand. He wasn't wearing his uniform, and he was too calm, too composed. They both looked so good together, like they were made for each other. Mikhail trembled. Who is he? While Max just looked at him with his cold eyes. Hey guys, before we continue, if you've made it this far, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Your feedback helps a lot. As soon as Jubillion arrived, Rosemary greeted her warmly and glanced curiously at the man beside her. Who is this with you, Lady Jubillion? Rosemary asked, her eyes twinkling. Jubillion smiled softly. My lover, Max. At her words, the noble ladies around them gasped and swooned, already enchanted by Max's striking looks. Together, Jubillion and Max looked every bit the perfect couple. As she and Rosemary exchanged pleasantries, Jubillion's gaze drifted across the party. Mikhail was here. She hadn't expected to see him. For a moment, Mikhail stood speechless, staring at her. Across the room, Max and Mikhail locked eyes, their expressions darkening instantly with irritation. Jubillion's current lover and her infamous ex, face to face, it was like a drama come to life. Mikhail, wrapped in his delusions, quickly convinced himself that Jubillion had brought Max just to make him jealous. He scoffed internally. He must be her servant, or just some lowly commoner. Clenching his jaw in frustration, Mikhail forced a smile and stepped forward to greet Jubilian, carefully hiding the bitterness brewing inside him. Meanwhile, Jubilian eyed him with suspicion. Once, she would have melted under his smile, chasing after him without pride or dignity. Now she could barely summon enough interest to exchange simple greetings. As the conversation flowed around them, Jubilian turned to Max, smiling. "Thank you for escorting me here." Before she could react, Max suddenly pulled her into a gentle hug. Jubilian stiffened in surprise. Across the room, Mikhail's anger simmered visibly. Watching another man embrace the woman who used to worship him was unbearable. Max's ploy had worked perfectly. Yet, glancing up at Max's face, Jubilian noted something odd. Is he nervous? His expression looked a little strained. Trying to lighten the atmosphere, Rosemary suggested brightly, "Since we already have one uninvited guest today, what harm could there be in adding another?" The noble ladies instantly agreed, clapping their hands in excitement. Jubilian's heart sank. Max's temper was unpredictable, and the last thing she needed was an incident. Before she could object, Mikhail's voice cut through the chatter, cold and firm. "We can't just invite a stranger we know nothing about," he said sharply. Rosemary immediately countered, "But he's Lady Jubilian's lover." Another voice joined in. "Rosemary, Mikhail is right. We can't just let unknown men into the tea party." Jubilian blinked at her. "Ah, so she's the host of this gathering," Veronica added after a moment. "Since he's Lady Jubilian's partner, he can wait in the guest house for now." Relieved, Jubilian thought, "Thanks to her, I won't have to worry about Max causing trouble here. Maybe Veronica isn't so bad after all." Meanwhile, Veronica hid a scowl. "Everyone's on edge around Sir Mikhail because of that woman," she thought bitterly. Time passed, and Mikhail, unable to bear it any longer, leaned closer to Veronica. His true intention wasn't to charm her, it was to provoke Jubilian. "There's no way she doesn't still love me. She always will," Mikhail thought smugly. Veronica blushed deeply at his closeness, utterly captivated. Watching from a distance, Jubilian felt a twinge of pity. She's falling for him, just like I once did. She could see right through Mikhail's act. Meanwhile, in the guest house, Max sat obediently, waiting just as Jubilian had asked. He tapped his foot impatiently, recalling her words, "Be a good boy and wait." Despite his outward calm, Max was seething inside. His thoughts kept drifting back to Mikhail, his blood boiling. He remembered the intelligence reports he had received, the ones detailing how Mikhail had used Jubilian, manipulating her feelings whenever it suited him. Max stood up, adjusting his cuffs with a grim determination. It was time to stir up a little trouble. At the tea party, Mikhail put on a charming act. He even hand-fed Veronica dainty sweets, whispering sweet words that made her blush fiercely. But the truth was, Mikhail didn't care about Veronica in the slightest. His real focus was on Jubilian, watching her, waiting for any reaction. Surely, he thought, she won't just sit quietly while I court another woman right in front of her. The old Jubilian would never have allowed it. Yet to his growing irritation, Jubilian wasn't even sparing him a glance. She was deeply engrossed in a cheerful conversation with Rosemary, smiling and laughing without a care in the world. The other noble ladies began stealing curious glances at Jubilian, whispering among themselves. She had become the true center of attention, not Mikhail. Seizing the moment, Rosemary asked, her eyes twinkling, "Lady Jubilian, would you honor us by joining our tasting event?" Jubilian blinked, startled. "Me?" She felt a wave of panic. "I don't deserve something like that." As she hesitated, unsure how to refuse politely, Mikhail stewed silently. His glare fixed on Jubilian, furious that she continued to ignore him. Just as Jubilian was about to decline, Veronica abruptly spoke up. "That's not possible." Everyone turned to her. "We have rules," Veronica continued coolly. "A participant must first complete the proper procedures before joining. We can't simply allow anyone in." The other noble women murmured their agreement. Jubilian, humbled, bowed her head slightly. "I understand. Thank you for considering me," she said softly. As she lifted her gaze, something outside the window caught her eye. Her breath hitched. Perched on a tree branch, practically glowing under the afternoon sun, was Max. His sharp, piercing eyes were trained solely on her. "Oh no!" Jubilian's heart raced. "If anyone sees him, Father will kill me." Noticing her distraction, Mikhail followed her gaze and froze. Max was lounging casually on the branch, looking completely at ease. Jubilian struggled to stay focused on the conversation as Mikhail's anger bubbled over. He clenched his jaw so tightly it almost cracked. How dare he look at my woman like that? Max, catching Mikhail's furious stare, smirked lazily. Then, with a mocking tilt of his hand, he made a casual die gesture. Mikhail's chair scraped loudly against the floor as he abruptly stood. "I need some fresh air," he said through gritted teeth, forcing a stiff smile. Veronica immediately rose. "I'll come with you." But Mikhail avoided her reaching hand, saying curtly, "That's not necessary. I'll be right back." Veronica sat back down, hurt flashing across her face. Meanwhile, Jubilian was practically wilting under the weight of her anxiety. If father sees Max doing something stupid like this, he'll drag me straight to the Crown Prince and force me into marriage. She glanced back at the window, and Max was gone. Panicking, she tried to refocus, only to realize the other noblewomen were gushing about something. When she finally caught a fragment of the conversation, she turned to Rosemary and whispered, "I'm sorry. What do you mean by my tea?" Rosemary laughed kindly. "The tasting event requires each participant to bring their own special tea blend. It's a tradition." "Oh no, because of Max, I wasn't even listening." Jubilian thought, feeling even more overwhelmed. At that very moment, outside, Mikhail, burning with rage, grabbed a sword and stormed toward the guest house, determined to challenge Max. But when he arrived, he found Max already waiting, arms crossed, an expression of utter boredom on his face. "Took you long enough?" Mikhail's eyes darkened in fury, while Max only raised an eyebrow, utterly unimpressed by Mikhail's frustration. Meanwhile, while Jubilian was washing her hands, her thoughts lingered on the tea party she was planning to host. It was then that Veronica entered, demanding to know why Jubilian had been staring at her during the recent gathering. Taken aback, Jubilian explained that her intentions had not been malicious. She only wished to warn Veronica about Mikhail, who, in her own past experience, had taken advantage of her as well. Veronica asked in a trembling voice if Jubilian was implying that she too was being used. Jubilian quickly apologized, saying she never meant to wound her feelings. Yet as Veronica wept, the sight reminded Jubilian painfully of the sorrows from her previous life. Outside, Max and Mikhail faced each other in a tense standoff. Mikhail, wearing an ominous expression, drew his sword and charged. Before the blade could even reach him, Max drove a brutal kick into Mikhail's stomach, a strike so forceful that the pain seemed to shoot straight to his head. Collapsing to his knees, Mikhail could hardly believe the overwhelming strength Max possessed. Demanding answers, Mikhail asked who Max was and why he was at Jubilian's side. Max simply replied that it was none of his concern. Enraged, Mikhail pressed his sword to Max's neck and ordered him to speak. With a smirk, Max declared that he was Jubilian's beloved. The claim left Mikhail furious, for he could not accept that Jubilian would ever love a commoner. At that moment, Jubilian herself appeared and ordered Mikhail to lower his sword. Startled, he stammered her name, but she firmly corrected him, reminding him to address her properly as Lady Floyan. Reluctantly, he sheathed his weapon. Jubilian then demanded to know why he had dared to raise a blade against Max. Mikhail insisted that it was all a misunderstanding, but before he could continue, Max sharply reminded him to use her proper title. The insult stoked Mikhail's fury, and he reached for his sword again, only for Jubilian to warn that if he persisted, she would inform her father. She quickly turned to Max, concerned for his condition. Their affectionate exchange only deepened Mikhail's rage. Unable to contain himself, he grabbed Jubilian's hand and demanded that she speak with him alone. Max, furious, shouted at him to let go, but Jubilian calmed Max, urging him to compose himself. Mikhail misread her restraint as a sign of lingering affection and pleaded with her to come with him. But Jubilian, her eyes flashing with authority for the first time, coldly ordered him to release her hand. Shocked, he hesitated, trembling as he asked her why she was treating him this way. She repeated her command, warning that next time he dared to act without manners, he would be punished. Gritting his teeth, Mikhail finally let go. Turning to Max, Jubilian stated that the matter was settled. But Mikhail, desperate, demanded to know why she had chosen Max and not him. He asked if she had not merely taken Max's side to provoke his attention. Confused by such arrogance, Jubilian wondered why she would ever wish for the attention of a man like him. Looking like a child whose favorite toy had been stolen, Mikhail listened as she declared she no longer cared for him. When he reminded her that she had once confessed her love, she answered coldly that those feelings were in the past. The revelation left him stunned as Jubilian and Max quietly departed together. Two noble ladies who had overheard everything left as well, unsettled by Mikhail's presence, while he himself stood in disbelief, unable to process what had just unfolded. Veronica soon approached, asking if he was all right, but he shoved her aside in frustration, causing her to fall to the ground. As she sat there in tears, Veronica recalled Jubilian's warning and realized that she too was now suffering as Jubilian once had. Meanwhile, Mikhail, consumed with rage and humiliation, growled to himself that he would never allow Jubilian to cast him aside so easily. Inside the carriage, Jubilian found herself staring at Max. The moment he noticed her gaze, he asked why she kept looking at him. Observing his calm and confident posture, she thought to herself that he needed to be disciplined. She reminded him that he ought to be careful about how he acted in front of others. Bringing up the incident with Mikhail earlier that day, she explained that if it hadn't been for her intervention, something terrible could have happened. Max questioned if she was implying that he would have lost to Mikhail. With a proud look, he added that even if 10 Mikhail had come at him, he still would have won. Jubilian almost felt her heart stop at his arrogance. She told him she wasn't calling him weak, but asked what he would do if something truly happened to him. Max, still filled with pride, replied that nothing would ever happen to him. Closing the distance between them, Jubilian explained in frustration that she was speaking only because she worried about him. She warned him that no matter how strong he was, overconfidence in one's abilities could be fatal. Her words stemmed from her own past, when her mistakes had caused people to turn their backs on her, leaving her completely alone. Her unexpected outburst caught Max off guard. He eventually nodded in agreement, though Jubilian doubted the sincerity in his words. Still, she squeezed his hand happily, thanking him for listening. Max grew embarrassed, but couldn't resist smiling when he saw the genuine expression on her face. For the first time, he thought that if she worried about him so much, perhaps he should try to be kinder. The next day at the Floyan mansion, Max arrived under the impression that Jubilian had invited him for a private meal. To his surprise, the Duke himself was seated across the table, his piercing gaze fixed directly on Max. With no choice but to comply, Max joined them, though the tension between him and Duke Floyan was unmistakable. Their eyes locked as if they were already engaged in battle. When the meal was served, she tried teaching him how to drink soup properly, unaware that Max already knew table manners. She, however, was delighted at the chance to guide him. When she instructed the butler to bring medium-rare steaks, Max panicked internally, for he detested undercooked meat. Missing the moment to object, he endured Duke Floyan's sharp glare, while the Duke himself muttered inwardly that his daughter was too easily deceived by men. As soon as the steaks were served, Jubilian offered to cut Max's portion. He grew anxious, thinking he didn't want her to help with every little thing. Before he could refuse, Duke Floyan took the plate instead. Slowly slicing through the steak, red juices bled onto the dish. He remarked coldly that a steak might look one way on the outside, but reveal something very different inside. His eyes shifted to Max, implying the comparison. Max, frustrated, understood the insult. Jubilian nearly gagged at the sight of blood, while the Duke continued, saying that when something appeared different inside than outside, one would inevitably see blood. He then asked for her plate, before suggesting that they share tea afterward. Jubilian, struck by a sudden thought, proposed that they drink tea she had prepared herself. Both the Duke and Max seemed surprised, though for different reasons. Their moment was interrupted when the head butler entered, announcing that the Emperor had summoned the Duke. Jubilian urged her father to go, but Duke Floyan brushed it aside, declaring that the tea was more important to him. Even Max agreed. Later, as they shared Jubilian's tea, she felt awkward until Duke Floyan unexpectedly complimented its taste. For the first time, she heard such words from her father. Max too praised her tea, but Jubilian frowned slightly, recalling how much he claimed to hate the tea before. She wondered if he was lying to please her. With a sigh, she felt relieved at least that she no longer had to worry about her upcoming tasting party. The Duke soon told her to rest, saying he wished to speak privately with Max. The moment she disappeared from sight, Duke set his cup down with a faint clink. He asked in a stern voice why he kept hovering around his daughter and demanded to know his true intentions. Max told him he had no ill intentions against his daughter. He paused, realizing he didn't fully understand his own feelings for her. The Duke glared at him impatiently. Max, lost in thought, asked himself if it is love. Finally, he confessed to the Duke that perhaps he is in love with her. The Duke was left speechless, wondering if he had heard correctly. When Max first approached Jubilian, it had been with the intention of killing her, removing what he saw as the Duke's greatest obstacle. But over time, something had changed. When he was with her, he felt at peace. Every moment spent at her side became precious, and the very thought of her leaving him filled him with fear. He confessed that, against his own will, he had come to love her. The Duke remained silent, struggling to digest his words. Max assured him that he harbored no ill intentions and would never abandon Jubilian. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away. Duke Florian clenched his jaw, unsettled, and muttered inwardly, if Max had truly been serious. In her room, Jubilian kept wondering what sort of conversation her father and Max might have been having. She felt glad that the three of them had been able to share lunch together, thinking that perhaps her plan was finally starting to work. Her thoughts were interrupted when she suddenly heard a knock on the window. Startled, she turned and found Max standing there, his cheeks faintly flushed. She thought in surprise that he had once again come through the window, though this time at least he had the courtesy to knock. When she opened it, she cupped his face in her hands and asked why his cheeks were so red, wondering if he might be running a fever. She quickly asked if he was feeling all right. Max, now so close to her that he could hear his own heart pounding, blushed even harder and, with a faint grin, remarked that he had finally understood something. Jubilian grew puzzled, uncertain of what exactly he meant, and began to wonder whether he truly was unwell. As they sat together, she grew flustered by his nearness, and trying to steady herself, asked what he and her father had discussed. Max explained that the Duke seemed to be doubting the nature of their relationship. Hearing this, Jubilian felt a pang of disappointment, thinking that after all her effort, was that really the result? Max then suggested that they should try to learn more about each other and asked what she liked. After thinking for a moment, she replied that she enjoyed flowers, drinking tea, and reading books. He listened with quiet delight, happy to learn about her preferences. But soon she slumped back with a sigh, saying that this was not what they should be doing right then. She reminded him that if they were caught, she would be forced to marry the crown prince, something she could not allow. When Max asked why she seemed to despise the crown prince so much, she admitted that he frightened her. She even whispered a rumor she had heard, that the prince had once murdered an innocent servant of his. At those words, Max stiffened. Jubilian had no idea that the servant he had killed had in fact been an assassin sent to eliminate him. Trying to defend himself without revealing his identity, he told her that she should not judge the prince without ever having met him. Jubilian countered sharply that she had never met a panther either, but she instinctively knew that if she ever did, it would likely be her last day. Her words nearly brought tears to Max's eyes, as he thought to himself that it wasn't true. He was not the monster she imagined. He then asked her quietly whether, if the crown prince promised not to harm her, she would be willing to marry him. Jubilian trembled at the suggestion, shivering at the mere thought of being near the prince. Still, she muttered that perhaps she would consider it, but only if she could be certain he would not try to kill her. At that moment, Max decided privately that he would have to reveal the truth, that as the crown prince himself, he would never harm her. With that resolution weighing on him, he left her room, determined that if he wanted her to accept him, the first thing he needed to do was rehabilitate the image of the crown prince. That night, while asleep, Jubilian had been restless, her face flushed as though she were burning with fever. In her dreams, fragments of her childhood resurfaced. Her mother whispered for her to hide inside the wardrobe. When little Jubilian had innocently asked about her father, her mother's expression had turned frantic. She had shouted that Jubilian's father was a monster and had begged her to stay silent. Holding the sobbing child tightly, the woman had warned that if the monster ever found them, they would both die. Jubelian had jolted awake with a gasp, her hand clutching her throat as if she had been strangled. Her breath came in quick bursts, and she realized with confusion that, though she could barely remember her mother's face, that woman still appeared vividly in her dreams. Meanwhile, in the Emperor's palace, Emperor Darius clenched his fist around a letter, the one sent by Max. Fury burned in his eyes as he read it, his anger directed entirely toward his son's reckless actions. Soon after, Duke Florian entered the hall, bowing respectfully in greeting. The Emperor, his voice cold and commanding, ordered the Duke to depart for the south immediately. The command caught the Duke by surprise. The Emperor then revealed that Margrave Lennox had been plotting treason, secretly assembling an army behind his back. The Duke frowned, stating that Lennox had always been loyal to the Empire and had defended it countless times. He questioned why His Majesty would suddenly doubt the Margrave's loyalty. The Emperor only smirked, his gaze cold and knowing. He reminded the Duke that, unlike him, Lennox wore no collar, no magical restraint of obedience. The rings glinting on the Emperor's fingers were the very tools that bound Duke Florian's will to his. With a cruel smile, the Emperor remarked that he wished he had more faithful dogs like Duke Florian. The Duke bowed his head in silence, hiding the hatred that burned behind his eyes. In his heart, he longed to tear the Emperor's body apart piece by piece, yet the thought of his daughter restrained him. It was because of that cursed restraint that he had chosen to keep his distance from Jubelian. He had wanted to protect her from his dangerous position, though to her, it had only seemed like hatred. She had grown up believing her father despised her, unaware that he loved her more deeply than she could ever imagine. The Duke's only desire now was to break free from the Emperor's control, those invisible chains that enslaved him. The tense silence of the throne hall was suddenly broken by a loud crash as the doors burst open. Max strode in without hesitation, a mischievous grin on his face. He asked his father if he had missed him, his tone teasing yet sharp. Emperor Darius froze, his composure faltering. He demanded to know how Max could have arrived so quickly when the letter had only just reached the palace. Max replied with feigned innocence that he had simply missed his father too much and had left the moment he sent the letter. The Emperor's temper flared as he demanded to know how his son dared to enter without warning. Max only smirked and asked if he had interrupted an important conversation, openly implying curiosity about what his father and the Duke had been discussing. The Emperor's confidence wavered. Old memories resurfaced, memories of when Max had been a child. There had always been something about Max that frightened him to the core. Breaking the heavy silence, Duke Florian told Max to leave at once, reminding him that he was interrupting the Emperor's affairs. Max's eyes glinted as he asked whether the Duke was giving him orders now. The Duke replied coldly that it was Max who had been defying Imperial commands. The Emperor, observing the exchange, felt relieved. As long as Duke Florian remained loyal, his troublesome son would never be able to act freely. With that reassurance, he decided to send another commander to the south instead of the Duke. Elsewhere, in the Empress's chamber, chaos erupted the moment she heard of Max's return. Enraged, she demanded to know what had happened to the spies sent to track him. When she was told that all contact with them had been lost, she hurled an ink pot at the messenger, shouting for him to get out. Just then, Beatrice, Max's younger sister, entered the room. She calmly told her mother that since her brother had returned, it would be best if they welcomed him warmly, before anyone else had the chance to do so. Later, as the Duke prepared to depart, he seemed pleased that he would no longer have to travel south, a relief he silently credited to Max. Before the Duke could leave, however, Max stepped forward and requested a moment of his time. The two soon sat down for tea, and once the attendants had withdrawn, Max removed his helmet, revealing his face. The Duke, curious, asked what Max wished to discuss. Max questioned him about the conversation he had earlier shared with the Emperor, but the Duke calmly replied that those were classified orders. Max, unwilling to accept that answer, pressed harder, attempting to draw the truth from him. He mentioned having heard rumors of an assassination attempt on the Emperor during his absence, to which the Duke coldly advised him not to concern himself with such matters. Unbeknownst to Max, the Duke already knew that Max had been the one commanded to stage that very attempt. The Duke then remarked that the true mastermind behind the attack had yet to be discovered, fixing Max with a piercing, almost threatening gaze. Max stiffened under the weight of that look. Trying to sound composed, Max explained that as the Emperor's son, he merely wished to know who had committed such a crime, that it was his duty as Crown Prince to stay informed about palace affairs. The Duke, however, dismissed his reasoning, saying he lacked both the authority and the justification to misuse his position in front of him. As the Duke stood to leave, he remarked that he had avoided the southern assignment thanks to Max, and, with a sharp glare, warned him to stay away from his daughter. The words left Max grinding his teeth. Once the Duke was gone, he clenched his fists and in anger hurled a cup from the table, though one of the nearby soldiers managed to catch it just in time. Max silently vowed that he would find another way, no matter what it took. At first, he had planned to send a letter to Jubilian, hoping to prove through words that he was not a threat to her. Yet he knew that as long as the Duke stood between them, such a letter would never reach her hands. Worried and frustrated, he decided to seek advice from Frisia. When the soldier removed his helmet, Max then handed his own helmet to him, warning that things would end badly if anyone discovered that Victor was impersonating him. After Max left, Victor tore off the helmet in irritation, cursing its unbearable weight, only to find Max standing right behind him. Instead of scolding him, Max asked how he used to send letters without the head of the house noticing, demanding that he share his old tricks from courting his lovers. That night, outside Jubilian's residence, Max fastened a letter to a pigeon's leg, muttering a mock threat that he would eat it if it failed to deliver the message. The bird took flight toward her window, and Max felt a flicker of satisfaction, a small sense of victory, knowing that his letter was finally on its way to her. As Jubilian worked at her desk, her thoughts kept drifting toward the tasting event she was to host the next day. The weight of responsibility made her anxious, though she found comfort in knowing that Rose would be there to support her. While glancing out the window, she suddenly noticed a pigeon flapping its wings furiously against the glass. Startled, she let out a panicked cry, believing for a moment that the bird was trying to break in and attack her. Her shrieks echoed through the room until Mary rushed in. Seeing Jubilian's tearful face, Mary asked what had happened. When she learned that her mistress was terrified of a pigeon, she sighed in disbelief and immediately hurled the tray she had been carrying at the bird. The frightened pigeon fluttered away, but as it took off, Mary caught sight of a faint glint tied to its leg. Realizing it was a letter, she froze. It dawned on her that the pigeon was not ordinary. It was a carrier pigeon, the kind used to deliver confidential messages during wartime. Jubilian, equally astonished, wondered aloud why she had never seen one before. After a moment's thought, she concluded that it must have been a threat. Mary stood speechless at the absurdity of the situation, while Jubilian patted her shoulder, remarking dryly that sending letters through pigeons was far from romantic. Yet deep down, she could not help but wonder what was written in that letter, and who might have sent it. Elsewhere, Max glared at the very same pigeon, which now perched before him with its head hung low. He demanded to know why it had failed to deliver the letter, but the poor creature merely blinked at him helplessly. Frisia entered soon after, asking what had happened. Upon hearing Max's account and learning what he had written in the letter, she thanked the heavens that the pigeon's mission had failed. She proceeded to scold him for his reckless plan, explaining that it would have certainly ended in disaster. She advised him to seek a proper excuse to meet Jubilian personally in his capacity as the Crown Prince. Max gave a quiet nod and simply agreed, letting the pigeon go. Before leaving, Frisia mentioned rumors spreading from the Empress's circle concerning Max, as well as reports that the Emperor had grown suspicious of Margrave Lennox's army. When Max asked whether Rhagon was preparing for an invasion, Frisia admitted that the situation was uncertain. As they discussed the matter, Max instructed her to arrange a meeting with Margrave Lennox. She protested, warning that such an act might be seen as treason against the Emperor. Max, however, insisted that it was an opportunity, one that could secure not just the loyalty of the South, but the strength of the entire empire. He remembered how the Duke had thanked him earlier for sparing him the southern mission, and it became clear that the Duke's real intention had been to send Max there instead. Now, Max saw it as a chance to win the hearts of the southern people and expand his influence. The next day, the long-awaited tasting event began at Jubilian's residence. The halls were beautifully decorated, and the air buzzed with excitement. Despite her nerves, Jubilian greeted the arriving guests warmly, thanking them for attending. Among them was Veronica. As the ladies settled in, their attention was suddenly drawn to a tall figure entering the room. Whispers spread quickly. Many assumed it was Jubilian's older brother. But when Jubilian turned around, her eyes widened in surprise. Standing there, welcoming the guests with composed dignity, was none other than her father. Jubilian had been taken aback when she saw her father that evening, yet there he stood, quietly proud beside her, offering his support in front of the assembled guests. As the attendees greeted him, they spoke of him as the Empire's greatest hero, though Duke, in his habitual humility, brushed off their praise. He insisted that such formalities were unnecessary, for they were all friends of his daughter. He encouraged them to enjoy themselves and made certain they felt welcome in their home. When he gently patted Jubilian's head, she felt a rush of pride and affection, a small but meaningful gesture that reassured her. He seemed genuinely pleased by her efforts, and though she was slightly embarrassed, she could not suppress the gratitude swelling within her. She noticed the astonishment on the visitors' faces. Her heart swelled at their approval, but as soon as her father stepped away, a pang of loneliness settled over her. For the first time in a long while, she questioned whether he truly loved her. Later, during tea, the guests were struck by its fragrance, a strong, almost floral aroma with a distinct hint of roses. They admired the tea's appearance and asked how Jubilian had created such a unique flavor. For a fleeting moment, she was lost in thought, recalling her father's earlier presence. She explained how tea could absorb the scents of flowers or fruits when stored together. Her guests were impressed, one even commending her as brilliant for understanding the process. Jubilian smiled modestly, laughing off the compliment. She insisted she was not a genius, explaining that it had been the result of her hard work, countless days tending the roses, protecting them from harsh weather with Marilene's assistance. The flowers had been a gift she cherished deeply, and the guests were moved by her dedication. Across the room, Duke quietly observed his daughter and her companions, taking in the cheerful scene with a soft smile. Watching her, he wondered if she realized that she had been the reason he had survived. His thoughts drifted back to 13 years ago, to the time he had returned to the Floyan residence, battered and covered in blood. The servants had noticed the bloodstains on the floor, yet he barely registered them. He had retreated to his room, his mind heavy with dark thoughts. But then little Jubilian had appeared, unconcerned by the blood on his clothes, and simply smiled at him. She had been bored and wanted to play, thinking he was asleep. Climbing into his bed, she had patted his shoulder and murmured small prayers to the moon and stars, asking them to protect him and bring light into his world. Her innocence had shattered his despair. He had been moved to tears. In that moment, he realized that she had saved him. From that night on, he had resolved to do everything in his power to protect her. Later, as Jubilian glanced across the room at her father, she noticed a subtle change in his demeanor. Their eyes met for a brief instant, and then he left the room swiftly, leaving her puzzled. She had never seen him act like that before, and the sight unsettled her. Moments afterward, Lady Veronica delivered news that startled the other ladies. The Crown Prince, Maximilian, had returned to the capital. Jubilian's heart skipped a beat as the announcement sank in. Soon after, Max arrived at the gathering, apologizing for his tardiness. His presence, unexpected and quietly commanding, shifted the room's atmosphere. Jubilian had believed he would not arrive in time, yet there he stood. Her heart fluttered as she called him over to sit beside her. Lady Veronica, observing them silently, finally spoke with a sharp tone, remarking that it must be a relief for Lady Floyan to have someone at her side, now that she was no longer a candidate for the Crown Princess. Her words carried a subtle sting, and Max, perceiving the underlying implication, wrestled silently with the comment. The other women at the table visibly shrank back, fearful of becoming Crown Prince candidates themselves. Max felt the words deeply, having worked so hard to prove himself worthy, yet hearing only judgment and criticism. The conversation grew crueler when one lady claimed that the crown prince was so terrible a son that even the emperor had given up on him, labeling him the devil incarnate. Rumors of his monstrous nature, cruelty, and unworthiness spread rapidly, and Max felt the weight of their false accusations pressing upon him. Jubilian, uncomfortable but resolute, realized she could not remain silent. She urged the women to refrain from judging, insisting that although they had not met him yet, he could be far better than they imagined. Other women, including Lady Veronica and Lady Rose, were left speechless. Gradually, the women nodded in acknowledgement, conceding to her point. Relieved, Jubilian allowed herself a small smile. She had done what she could to stem the spread of harmful gossip, though she knew she had to tread carefully when dealing with matters of the imperial family. Max, now holding his cup of tea, quietly praised her, saying she had spoken well. Though tension lingered from earlier conversations, the atmosphere between them softened. Lady Rose's words later lingered in Jubilian's mind. She admitted having misjudged Lady Floyan at first, believing her to be cold and unapproachable, but now recognized her kindness and warmth. Jubilian, avoiding direct eye contact, felt a quiet sting. She recalled being once labeled a villain. Yet Lady Rose's acknowledgement of her gentle nature brought a measure of relief, and the other ladies nodded in agreement, surprised by her genuine charm. Lady Veronica, serious in tone, reminded Jubilian that even though she had shared the secrets of the tea, membership in the tasting party depended on objective judgment. When she declared the tea to be a simple Darjeeling, Jubilian felt a twinge of disappointment, thinking she had failed. But Veronica praised her meticulous preparation, a compliment veiled in polite critique, warning that breaking the rules would result in expulsion. The other ladies seemed delighted at this guidance, while Max joined in with quiet, polite applause. As the party drew to a close, Jubilian reflected on the day's events. She could hardly believe that Lady Veronica had permitted her participation in the tasting party. These women, she realized, might become either her closest allies or her fiercest adversaries, depending on circumstances. Max, sensing her unease, inquired gently what troubled her. She admitted she was not accustomed to such social gatherings. Max listened quietly, recalling how Frieza had described Lady Floyan as an outcast in high society, often the target of gossip, forced into hostility and avoidance. He understood the sting of exclusion and suspected this was why he had grown attached to her. Jubilian's words reminded him of his own painful past, when he had been falsely accused of killing animals, leading others to see him as a monster. At that time, only her mother had been his refuge. The Empress had forbidden him from visiting her residence, concerned about hidden dangers, yet she had trusted him fully, comforting him and wiping his tears. Recalling this, Max felt both pain and gratitude. He spoke softly, reassuring Jubilian that she need not worry, that everything would be all right, and that believing in herself was enough. As he gently patted her head, she looked up at him, feeling a lightness in her heart she had not expected.